Thank you, Jolene. So before we officially call the meeting to order, just wanted to point out the note in chat from Joreen. We're trying to limit some visual noise from our meeting. So we're going to ask everyone, except for the governing board members or anyone who's speaking, to keep their videos off so we can really highlight the board and the discussion. So appreciate that. And if you have, so we will ask that you use, if you're joining via your computer, you use the raise hand feature that Zoom has. You find that by going to the participants tab, and either at the bottom of the list you'll see raise hand, or sometimes if you hover over your own name and click on more, you'll see a raise hand option. If you're joining on the phone, you can hit *9 to indicate that you'd like to raise your hand, and then we'll call on you at the appropriate time and unmute you. So with that, I will go ahead and actually reconvene the governing board of the Monterey Peninsula Community College regular meeting for August 26th at 4:03 p.m. And if we could have a roll call, please.
Chair Yuri Anderson.
Here.
Vice Chair Lauren Steck.
Here.
Trustee Rosalind Green.
Here.
Trustee Marilyn Dunn-Gustafson.
Here.
Trustee Rick Johnson.
Here.
Interim Superintendent President David Martin.
Here.
We are all here.
Great, thank you. All right, so I believe it is Trustee Dunn-Gustafson's turn to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance today. So if we could all mute ourselves and stand if you're able to.
After I unmute, I can do this. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Marilyn. All right, so item 3C, report of action taken in closed session. There is no reportable action taken by the board from closed session. 3D is approval of the agenda. Assuming there are no additions or corrections to the agenda, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Johnson, second by Trustee Green. Is there any member of the public that would like to make a comment on the agenda? All right, seeing none, we will, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Certainly. Chair Yuri Anderson.
Yes.
Vice Chair Lauren Steck.
Yes.
Trustee Rosalind Green.
Aye.
Trustee Marilyn Dunn-Gustafson.
Aye.
Trustee Rick Johnson.
Yes.
That is unanimous.
Thank you. Okay, and so now we're on to item 4, recognition. And we're going to acknowledgement of guests with new faculty introductions being led by Dr. Kendra Cabrera and Dr. Vincent Van Chupin. So let's see, Kendra and Vincent, if you can unmute yourselves and turn your video and introduce some new folks to us.
Well, outstanding. I'll start, if you don't mind, Kendra, and we can go in the order as presented in the agenda. I would like to start by welcoming aboard Dr. Princess Gilbert in biology. Dr. Gilbert was born and raised in the Bay Area, and she holds a PhD in biology, a master's in evolutionary biology, and a bachelor's in biology with a minor in African American studies from UCLA. As an undergrad, her research interests were guided by her love for animals. She studied the Ethiopian wolf to help understand how to protect this critically endangered species. She examined the impact of the LA freeways on local mountain lion and bobcat populations. And she examined the impact of the Andes on the hermit hummingbirds of South America. Her PhD research was focused on investigating the incredibly rich diversity of life in Madagascar and the Coral Triangle. Dr. Gilbert has worked as a lecturer at UCLA, an adjunct professor at Crafton Hills College, a visiting assistant professor of biology at Claremont Colleges, and an adjunct professor at Keck Graduate Institute, where she taught computer programming. Her participation in minority-focused summer research programs allowed her to work with scientists at the University of Massachusetts, Columbia University, and the American Museum of Natural History. She loves working with students and showing them cool things about biology and the world around us. We're very excited to have Dr. Gilbert join MPC and our life science team.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to be here.
I'm not sure if Kendra or
I'm here,
Okay.
but my video will not go on. It says I don't have permission, so I'll just start then. It's my pleasure and honor to welcome Dr. Gordon Ginzo to Monterey Peninsula. Dr. Gordon Ginzo will be joining us in medical assisting in our life science division. Dr. Ginzo started his education at the community college level, graduating from Long Beach City College with an AS degree. During his time there, he developed a fondness for the community college system. He then transferred on to Cal State Long Beach, and he continued his educational career at CSU Long Beach in pursuit of biological sciences, where he earned a degree in zoology and physiology. Dr. Ginzo went on to the Southern California University of Health Sciences, graduating as the valedictorian of that class with a degree in the Doctor of Chiropractic. He began practicing chiropractic here in Monterey Peninsula in 1994, first in a partnership and then as the sole proprietor of his business. In 2010, Dr. Ginzo began his teaching profession at Hill College in Salinas, where he enjoyed teaching in the medical assisting program there. This led him to teaching at Monterey Peninsula College and joined us in 2017 as an adjunct instructor in our medical assisting program. Dr. Ginzo enjoyed his teaching experience so much that he decided to apply for the full-time position in medical assisting with encouragement from the program director, Monica Bell. Dr. Ginzo is very excited to be a part of the MPC family, helping students pursue their academic goals and their careers. And he looked forward to many years of service here at Monterey Peninsula College. Welcome, Dr. Ginzo.
thank you, Kendra. Welcome. Yay.
He's
All
here, I
right.
think.
Yes, he popped onto the screen and we could see his face for a second. I don't know if he can.
I couldn't unmute there for a while. I was in quarantine.
Oh, no.
But I'm glad to be here. Thank you very much. I look forward to many years here of serving the students. I guess there, now you can see me.
Yeah, there you are. Hopefully we'll see you in real life someday.
I hope so.
All right. Daniel Lopez intro. Are you?
Thank you. I'll
Mhm.
proceed, and I have the next three. So I'm really excited to welcome aboard Daniel Lopez to the math department. Daniel was raised in Salinas, California, and he attended MPC after graduating from high school. He's worked for Pebble Beach Company in guest services and as a greenskeeper, but more importantly, he served as a student tutor at MPC's Math Learning Center. Daniel transferred to CSUMB, where his love for mathematics and math education flourished. Here he tutored, held workshops, and mentored students in the core math courses. He then transferred to San Jose State University to complete his graduate studies in mathematics. While at San Jose State, he served as a math instructor. Upon graduation, Daniel returned to CSUMB as a lecturer, coordinator for students with disabilities, and a support course coordinator. Additionally, he became a critical component in MPC's dual enrollment program as a math instructor at Seaside High School, where he taught pre-calculus and calculus. Daniel has also aided with the coordination of math circles, both in San Jose and the Navajo Nation in Arizona. As defined by Wikipedia, a math circle is a social structure where participants engage in the depths and intricacies of mathematical thinking, propagate the culture of doing mathematics, and create knowledge. Daniel's now made the full circle and returned to MPC as a full-time math instructor. Welcome home, Daniel. We're really pleased to have you back.
Thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to be back and serve my community in a different capacity. I hope to be here as long as I possibly can and, help the students make this transition throughout their education, just like my faculty members assisted me.
Thank you, Daniel. And I'm really excited to work with you in person someday again.
Hopefully sooner than later, right?
I now have the honor of introducing two new faculty members from the nursing division. First, I'd like to introduce Lewis. I'm not sure if Lewis is here, but Lewis is a native of Boston, Massachusetts. He's been a nurse for almost 30 years, practicing in adult critical care and more recently as a dialysis nurse in the nephrology division of Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, one of Boston's leading teaching hospitals. He earned an associate's degree in nursing from a community college in Massachusetts, much like the program at MPC. In 2008, he earned a BSN from Emmanuel College in Boston. He returned in 2015 to complete his MSN with a specialty in nursing education. Lewis is currently in a PhD program in health professions education at Simmons University in Boston. From 2015 to 2017, in addition to his own nursing practice, Lewis was a clinical instructor for Simmons University. After that, he served as an associate professor of practice at Simmons University with a focus on teaching med-surg nursing. Lewis and I share something in common. We both drove from Boston to accept our positions at MPC. Lewis, we're grateful that you made the journey to join an outstanding team at MPC's Maureen Church Colburn School of Nursing.
Thank you, Vince. Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a real honor, and I'm enjoying the environment despite some of the smoky air. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody in person and meeting you all. And I can tell you we have a great nursing program, and the students I'm working with are absolutely exceptional. I'd be very proud to have any of them be my nurse. Thank you again. It's nice to see you all.
Thank you.
And before I welcome the next member, I just want to give a shout out to my entire STEM division. I would be remiss if I did not give them the credit for what they have done to overcome the obstacles that we have faced posed by pandemics, rolling blackouts, wildfires, bad air quality, and evacuation. So let me say to the STEM division, I'm really proud to be your dean. And without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Megan Miranda, also a new nursing instructor at MPC. Megan was born and raised in Monterey County and has called this beautiful area home for most of her life. She graduated from MPC School of Nursing in 2003, and thereafter she worked with CHOMP and Natividad, primarily in the intensive care units. She earned both the BSN and an MSN while working at Natividad. Megan enjoys helping other nurses gain better understanding of pathophysiology and how to incorporate evidence-based nursing interventions into daily nursing practice. But she loves teaching nursing students even more. She's delighted to have the opportunity to return to her alma mater and engage in such a stellar group of students and educators, and has been extremely impressed with the creativity and the perseverance that her colleagues have shown in overcoming every obstacle that has come their way. She says, and I quote, "None of us do this alone, and I count myself privileged to be part of a team that places so much focus on the well-being and success of our students." Welcome back to MPC, Megan, and thank you for helping us address the challenges of COVID-19.
Welcome, Megan. I don't think she's with us this afternoon, but exciting to have another Robo Ball. Thank you, Dr. Van Julen. Thank you, Dr. Cabrera, for those introductions this afternoon. Really excited to have all of these wonderful new faculty members joining our team. And as we said, looking forward to getting to congregate and enjoy each other in real life at some point in the not too distant future, maybe mid 2021 if we're lucky. So with that, I'm going to be real, Rick. That we're going to turn to some less happy news. And Mr. Martin, if you could share some thoughts about Miss Laura Patterson and lead our meeting in a moment of silence in her honor.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair Anderson. And as you mentioned, we do have some unfortunate news to share with everybody today, but we did lose a member of our campus community. Laura Patterson passed on July 27th, 2020. She worked in the Office of Academic Affairs as our curriculum specialist for many years, and prior to that, she served as our college receptionist. She contributed to the success of MPC and academic affairs for many years. Laura had a fun spirit and energy, a love for all things Harry Potter, and most importantly, her love for her family, which included two very young and incredibly adorable boys, Jason and Jeremy. She would beam from ear to ear every time she shared pictures of them. Laura was a valued and respected member of our campus community. Although she left us too early, she will always be remembered. I'd like to ask everybody to take a moment of silence and recognize Laura Patterson. Thank you, Chair Anderson.
Thank you, David. This one hits particularly close to home for me, being about the same age as Laura with two young children. So I hope that you will express on behalf of myself and our entire board and campus our deep condolences to her family. All right, so next on our agenda, item 5A is public comment. Anyone wishing to address the board on matters not on this agenda but within the purview of this board, you have 3 minutes to do so. So again, you can indicate that you'd like to speak by, if you're on the computer, going to the participants tab, and either at the bottom of the list, you'll see an option to raise your hand, or maybe hovering over the word more might give you that option. If you're joining via phone, hit *9. All right, seeing none, we will close public comment and move on to item 6 on the agenda, which organization and staff reports and presentation. Start with the ASMP report. And I saw Michelle on the participants list, so I'll go ahead and unmute you. And there was a written report, so if there's anything you'd like to add to your report before we give the board members an opportunity to ask questions or make comments.
Hi all, I just wanted to say hi, and I just wanted to keep the update that we are still looking for a student trustee. We had a few people apply, but I did have to lay out the meetings and like the amount of time commitment to them, and once they were able to kind of see their schedule and the time commitment required, they realized that maybe it's not the best position, so we're still on like kind of a hunt, but hopefully soon we're able to find one.
Any questions from board members for Michelle? I was just wondering if there were any best practices or I don't know if incentives is the right word, but and I'm going to use the word offered to student trustees in other areas that you might be aware of, or maybe Mr. Martin, that helps make it possible for students to participate on the governing board, or that you've heard any of your fellow students mention would make it possible for them to sit at this leadership table?
Yes, and thank you for the question, Chair Anderson. And what we can do is work with Michelle and her leadership team to identify different settings where students are meeting virtually, and ask for permission to go and address those groups and provide a little bit of framework in regards to the position itself, and really make a proactive effort to start reaching out to different groups on campus. And I very much look forward to working with Michelle and her team to move that initiative forward.
I did want to say that any incentives as far as that goes, they're all kind of laid out to people who apply, and those are like the ASMPC benefits, whether it be, in physical times, it was like access to printers, free printing, and like stipends and etc. It really comes down to time commitment. I've been trying to spread the word to my classes by holding announcements during labs or during the class. And I've been getting more applicants through that. But because they're all STEM students, it's a little hard to get that time commitment from them. However, I've made it clear to my council that everyone needs to kind of reach out to different groups, because it's really hard to reach out to students just through, social media and through online. It's so hard. So we're just hoping that we can get to like different groups and finally find one.
Well, we appreciate the effort you're putting into it. It's really important to have student voice at this table and letting us know what it is that the students are needing, so that our board can prioritize and make sure that those are taken into consideration. So thank you for continuing to work on getting a student to this table. Look forward to having someone sit with us. Any other comments or questions from the board for Michelle before we deem this report accepted? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we have the Academic Senate report. I saw Adria in the room, so I'm gonna unmute you. If there's anything you'd like to add to your report, Adria, before we let the board ask questions or make comments?
Nope. It's a relatively brief report. We've just gotten underway for the semester, but it stands as submitted, and I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Awesome, thank you. Any questions from the board? No comments? Mr. Johnson, Trustee Johnson.
Mine is only to thank you again, Adria, by getting these reports a day or 2 days before. It's great. We actually don't have to be just listening and trying to find out how to react, but we have the time to think about it. So thank you so very much.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure.
Trustee Steck.
So Adria, I do have a question. At the very end of your report, you talk about acting on anti-racism, and this is an important and very timely topic. Do you have any, can you share any content about how you want to do this, or what it is that the Academic Senate is thinking of doing on this very important issue?
That's a great question, thank you. I do have a meeting scheduled with Dr. John Connolly and David Martin on Thursday to talk about a campus response to our anti-racism efforts. Frank Rivera, our vice president, our Senate vice president for this year, will be joining us. I don't really want to, faculty hiring is one area that I think we can make some progress, and we are in the process of reviewing those procedures right now. So I think that's one sort of very clear starting place. But what I'd like to do is maybe gather a group of Senate members and have a more focused conversation. Dialogue about what we think some of the strengths are here at MPC, some of the challenges, and some of the processes that we want to take a closer look at. So right now we're really in just developing the goals for the year, and then we'll work on what steps we need to take to implement them and be systematic about doing so.
Thank you.
All right. If there's no other questions or comments, we will then deem that report received. Thank you, Adria.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, next we had a report from the MPCEA, and I don't know that I saw Kevin in the room, no. Was there any other member of the MPCEA who wanted to make additional comments to the report that we had? Just looking for a raised hand. Seeing none. Any questions or comments from the governing board on the report that we received? So I don't know if I was being a little dense when I was reading it, and I know Kevin has a great way of communicating, but there was some indication of maybe some frustration about how classified staff members were interacting with our campus community in this reopening and having facilities that have been set up to be COVID compliant, but not necessarily utilizing them. And there was, again, I'm not sure if I was being dense in the reading. I felt like there were undertones and things that weren't being said directly, and would love an opportunity to have a direct conversation if somebody felt like that there were things that this governing board could or should be doing to help support our staff in a better way. So just gonna lay that out there. So if you could communicate that and let Kevin know that, of course, you all are there to talk and help if there's anything we can be doing. All right, so we'll receive that report. So next we have, I believe, MPCTA is here. Lauren, I'm gonna find you in the list so you can, I think, give us an oral report. Lauren.
Hi, folks. Hey.
Hello.
Thank you. Hi. Welcome to my home. Yeah, it's one of the neat benefits of doing it this way. I will step outside. All right. I just wanted to note, that this is the second week of the semester, and so I apologize for not having a written report. The first week of the semester is not the easiest time, right, to build that in. So what MPCTA has been doing up to this point in the semester has really been primarily focused on trying to ensure that there are good working conditions and workload protections for faculty while we're teaching online, the majority of us, and also that there are protections in place for faculty who have come back to teach face-to-face, because there are just a small handful. And over the summer, we were able to work, I think, very effectively to ensure that there would be an MOU in place at the beginning of the semester. And that's work that required us to cooperate with members of the district negotiating team, and it all went, I would say, fairly seamlessly. I also want to thank Adria, who is the president of the Academic Senate, because she also worked alongside us in order to get language regarding faculty evaluations during this period of distance learning that would meet the standards that MPCTA has, and also the standards of the Academic Senate, which is responsible for certain professional matters. And so we were able to collaborate with the Academic Senate over the summer in making sure that that language would satisfy kind of all the interested parties on campus. As the semester has begun, Of course, you know that there have been additional and new disasters that have been taking place in the region. And so in addition to our work making sure that the MOU would be ready and that information could be distributed to faculty from the very beginning, from our flex days on, about what working conditions would look like this semester, we've also worked to try to create a fund that's going to help support faculty who have been put out of their homes as a result of the fires, right? There are quite a few faculty who have had to evacuate in some cases, right? Faculty who are teaching quite complicated to teach online subjects like the creative arts. And so making sure that we are communicating kind of with the administration to ensure that learning resources are being provided to those faculty who might have had to leave them behind when they were evacuated, but also making sure that faculty's personal concerns are taken care of. The executive board of MPCTA created a $5,000 fund from our dues, from our kind of reserves of union dues that we can use to provide grants to faculty who might be, right, in a situation where they have been put out of their homes, or right, have been in a position where even if you're out of your home for a relatively short period of time, all of the food in your refrigerator might have gone bad, all of the, right, and those can have really devastating effects, particularly for part-time faculty who are often, right, more vulnerable to kind of financial pressures than full-time faculty, although, right, that's not always the case. So I want to make sure that we're taking care of part-time and full-time faculty, and that's something that we're striving to do. So we've rolled that out this week to make sure that if people need assistance, they have a place at MPCTA where they know they can request it. So that's been our action so far this semester. We're looking forward to returning to negotiations regarding evaluations this semester, hopefully, knock on wood, no more apocalyptic events. And right, that's going to allow us to finalize, right, to have revised every open portion of our contract. If you recall, when we settled the large sections of the contract, we left Article 14, which is faculty evaluations, open. And we have last semester, before everything went online, we worked very closely with the Academic Senate, with the entire body of the Senate, to create a proposal. And so at this point, it's really just about sitting down with district representatives and being able to finalize an agreement about that proposal that has been presented to the Academic Senate already. A neat side effect of presenting it to the Senate first is that everyone who's going to be in the room for the district, I think, has already seen it. And so hopefully that agreement can come very quickly. One of the things that we tried to do in the MOU related to evaluations this semester was do a little bit of beta testing of things that, that may become a part of our ongoing faculty evaluation process if the district and MPCTA are able to come to a quick agreement proposal that's already been presented at the Academic Senate. So those are really the things that are on our docket right now, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Lauren. Are there any questions or comments for Lauren from the board? Well, I just want to appreciate you for all of the work that you're doing around negotiations and contract cleanup, and then for really stepping forward to care for your members in the way that you have. It's my personal work life has been all disaster, COVID since March, and now fires for the last few weeks. So knowing that many of those folks that you're caring for are the people that I work for on a day-to-day basis, I really sincerely appreciate the union for stepping forward to do that. So thank you. Okay.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah. All right, so if there are no other questions or comments for Lauren, well, thank you for that oral report, and move to the superintendent, president, and vice president staff reports. So Mr. Martin, do you want to lead that discussion?
Yes, Chair Anderson, and thank you for the opportunity to address the board in regards to our monthly reports. The Vice Presidents and myself have submitted our monthly report in written format, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have. Two additional things that I wanted to mention outside of the written reports as presented is to touch base on the conversation that was just started by President Blanchard in regards to the impact of the local fires on our faculty, staff, and students. That impact is real, and we are in contact with our faculty and staff and our students who we believe are in an area that has been evacuated or was in the process of being evacuated. So we've reached out to our campus community, and the response has been universally caring from all groups. We're thrilled that different groups on campus and our labor partners participated in an effort to come together and provide support in any way that we can as a campus community. Right now, just using ballpark numbers, I do believe we have approximately 50 faculty and staff that may be directly impacted. We are still gathering information and working with students through individual faculty member channels as well as channels through academic affairs and student services. So we are still trying to make sure we can identify members of our community who may need help and offer assistance in any way that we can. Another thing that I do want to mention that is a bit of an outside of the reports as written is that as we venture off into the fall semester, it is something that we are considering is that all school districts and community colleges are also venturing off into the start of the school year, and many of our faculty, staff, and students have young children at home that are doing distance education. So right now, as a district, we're trying our best to provide the most flexible schedules to our employees and providing different types of accommodations. So if our employees need to be at home so their children can learn and they can assist with that learning, we are doing the best that we can as a district to make sure we are as flexible as possible with our employees during this challenging time. As we continue to develop stage 2 of our reopening plan, we're going to continue to explore new avenues and new opportunities to provide additional resources to our employees and members of our campus community who may have young children at home in which they need to be attentive to as they continue their studies as well. So that is definitely something that we are working on, and I look forward to bringing more information back to the board in the near future as stage 2 of the reopening plan starts to take shape here in the next couple of weeks. With that said, the Vice Presidents and myself stand ready to answer any questions that the board may have on our written reports.
Thank you, David. So how about we take it if there are any questions or comments on the Superintendent President's report first from the board. Trustee Steck.
Thank you for that, for the additional comments you just made, and that was all exciting to me and news to me. But as you quite correctly state, we have many faculty, staff members who have to be on campus at some point in time. Where are we on our Child Development Center? Is that open for business? Can our faculty drop off kids there? Is that a possibility?
Yes, and we are in the process of reopening. We did receive guidance and/or clearance from the California Department of Health to reopen our early childhood education. Based on the guidance, limited spots are available. I would defer to Director Proceed or Mr. Larry Walker for the exact number of spots, but that is an option that could be available to faculty and staff here in the near future. And I'm looking at Larry's screen if you wanted to add anything, Larry, in regards to the availability of spots.
Again, thank you, David, for passing that on, the assist. And I like your slam dunks, by the way. We've been open about 2 weeks in the early childhood. Hello? the early childhood development. We're serving currently about 30 students, well, 30 children, and they are broken up in pods of, keep on. So yes, we're opening. I'm having some technical difficulties here. Opening, we're doing well. They've been open a couple weeks. Things have been going very, very well. They have a approved plan that seems to be working as outlined. As President Martin said, Jeff Proceed, under his leadership, has done a fabulous job in ensuring that students that are coming in and their children are safe when they enter the lab school, while they're there, and when they exit. We, again, have been open a couple weeks with no incidents of any magnitude. So things seem to be going well. Of that, we do have several MPC faculty and or staff utilizing the Child Development Center. We're prepared to serve about 40 and slots. The 30 slots that were currently available were provided to those who were essential workers, those who may have had homeless and or other extenuating circumstances that limited their availability to childcare. So it was done on a tier, but right now, I think they have a capacity to serve up to 40. They're currently a little over 30 right now, and things are going well.
Thank you. Something to promote to our faculty if they don't already know about it, and our staff.
Any other questions or comments on the Superintendent President's report? So thank you for including the mailbag, David. Well, first I would say thank you for including those comments relative to the challenges that our faculty, staff, and students, particularly those who are parents, are facing right now as we all engage in distance learning. And I think it's important that we do point out the Child Development Center, but to recognize that there are children at all stages of childhood that are having this very bizarre educational experience. And I think for parents, particularly in those early years, in what we might often call the learning to read, not reading to learn stage, there are extra pressures on those folks. And I hope that the message that you just delivered is being delivered widely amongst your team, that those parents have the opportunity to come to their supervisors, to the administration, and express how this extra task that has been placed upon them is impacting them personally and professionally, and know that they have a safe opportunity to talk about the accommodations that might be needed to make sure that they can be good on all the fronts that they're being asked to be good on. So appreciate that message being delivered to us, and hope that it's making it back to your teams at all levels and to our students as well. Because I do know I'm listening to an MPUSD board meeting talking about how they're looking at deploying hotspots to the different families and recognizing that they have maybe have students at MPC, and so maybe that family isn't going to get a hotspot for their kid because they're looking at the community colleges providing that connectivity, and so that we are really all working together in a interconnected web right now to make sure that all of the learners at whatever stage they're at can access this virtual learning environment. And so that I appreciated that, which was there. And then in the mailbag, you pointed out the chancellor's call to action that was put forward, and there were a couple of things that I pulled out when I was looking at that. You know, really calling for a systemic review of law enforcement officers and first responders training, and I know that that was something that Trustee Steck had brought up, I think back in June, as something our board was interested in having, and wanted to get a sense of where we are on having that presentation and conversation, because I do think, as was pointed out in that call to action, the community college system has an opportunity to directly impact how our first responders and law enforcement officers are understanding their job and learning about how to be good community partners. And it was also calling for the Board of Trustees to be engaged as campus leaders in dialogues about campus culture. And so wanted to make sure that my colleagues saw that it was very specifically called out that we have a role in the conversations that are going to be going on in our district. And it talked about reviewing and updating our equity plans with urgency. And so wanted to get a sense from you on what does that look like for MPC. And then one that I'm admitting, I don't know if I was asleep at the wheel or it was more than a year ago, but it talked about that the system had adopted a system-wide diversity, equity, inclusion integration plan, a 5-year plan, and it was calling for a fast tracking of tier 1 priorities in a 6 to 12 month window. And so was hoping that sometime in the very near future, we could get like a crash course and what that is and what our plan is for really being fully engaged in this call to action that was highlighted in your report and put out by the Chancellor. So I'll stop and let you respond to all of that.
Well, thank you, Chair Anderson. And I very much appreciate you highlighting that component of the report because one of the, if not the centerpiece of the next several months and into the future is going to be MPC's response to this call to action. It is much more than just a conversation in the moment. It is something that this institution is going to take very seriously, and that is going to hopefully drive systemic change and conversations throughout the entire campus community. So in looking at the specific call to action document, we really hope to use the first Friday forum, not this Friday, but next Friday, to really start a conversation and to bring these specific items to light and start brainstorming as an institution. How can we approach these items and ultimately utilize the resources that we have on our campus to start making a difference? And that is something that we look forward to not only doing this semester, but really as part of our operational processes in the indefinite future. Obviously, the board's support and guidance and leadership is going to be critical in this. So we're very thankful for the board's initial and continued interest in being a part of this conversation. I think that staff looks forward to providing updates throughout the semester, but also as we start rolling up our sleeves and working together as the campus community to really identify areas that need change. We would welcome participation and engagement from the board, as well as the campus community and members of our external community as well. So I would say, Trustee Anderson, that your comments are very much appreciated. And I would encourage the board and everybody at this meeting to keep an eye out on their calendar for very meaningful opportunities to participate and engage here in the near future. And we will address all 5 of those call to action points in this semester.
Thank you. All right. Trustee Steck?
I'm totally embarrassed to do this, and this is purely blowing my own horn, but just so you know, and I'm just totally embarrassed about saying it, but there was a task force that came up with those recommendations, and the task force consisted of 15 people from throughout the system, including 2 trustees, and I was one of those 2 trustees. Just blowing my own horn. I hope to be involved in the future too on this issue.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So then are there any questions on the report from the Vice President of Advancement? Ms. Beckys report. I knew it. Trustee Dunn Gustafson.
And I apologize. I can't find the hand raise on at the bottom anymore.
You don't have to.
It's gone away.
Just unmute yourself.
Okay. I'll just unmute myself and start chatting. I think first of all, kudos to the TRIO grant that has come in, and also the partnership in the teacher credentialing pilot program with CSUMB. I would love to hear more about that program. I think it's just wonderfully exciting.
Okay, thank you, host, for unmuting me. Apparently I did not have the permissions, but thank you, Marilyn, for the kudos. It's very much appreciated. I am going to just briefly pause and mention that we learned recently that our TRIO grant not only got funded, we scored 123 out of 125. We were among the highest scores in the country. We even scored higher than several University of California applicants. So that was a really great day in the advancement office. To the Teaching Credential Partnership Program, and I'm not sure if Dr. Luke is with us today, but also Dr. Cabrera was really involved in helping us put that proposal together. But essentially, we're going to be partnering with the school districts and the County Office of Education to identify people who are on what are called PIPs and STIPs. So they're basically emergency teaching credentials. So they have some of the work done, but not all of it. And then we will have a dedicated staff person at MPC who will at some point be housed at the Marina Education Center, who will work with these individuals and help them figure out at what coursework they need to go to get to the next level. So for some people, they'll become CSUMB students. Other people may need to brush up on maths or science or some other subject. And so they'll probably be dual enrolled, some at MPC and some at CSUMB as well. So our partners at CSUMB were really excited because this is building a pipeline for their teaching credential program. We're excited because it's also providing more support for MPC students and providing, more folks coming to the Marina Education Center and our TPP program. But it really also helps to meet the regional shortage of K-12 teachers in the community. And so there's also going to be some test prep workshops to help the qualifying individuals to take and pass the CSET and the CBEST. Because that's apparently another big challenge for people, and also some fee waivers. So those test fees add up, and the grant will also help to provide qualifying individuals with waivers so that we'll be able to pay for their fees. So that's that grant in a nutshell.
That's it, Marilyn? Any other?
Actually, I had a.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, I just have one other. Are we still on advancement, or have we gone on to academic affairs? Or
we're still on advancement.
You want me to keep talking, or? Okay.
Trustee Green, did you want to make a comment on advancement? Did I see you tried to unmute? No. Okay. I will just say, Becky, I noticed that you mentioned that the foundation board is focused on recruitment, and I was just wondering if you'd talk a little bit about some of the vacancies or characteristics or who you're looking for your board. Like how many vacancies do you have?
Great question. Thank you, Yuri. We, according to our bylaws, we have quite a few vacancies, but we do try to add a certain number each year so that the terms don't all end at the same time. So we're looking at about 3 to 5 individuals between now and they'll begin their terms in January. We're always looking for ways to diversify the board, to make sure the board is representative of the communities that we serve and the student population that we serve. And I think we've made some tremendous progress on that in the past several years, but that's always something that we keep in mind. We've noticed a few skill sets that have termed off the board recently, including legal expertise. We've always had an attorney, 1 or 2 on our board, and we no longer have that. Of course, as a fundraising board, we're always interested in people that have an interest either in learning or experience with working in fundraising, or are comfortable with fundraising, or just also interested in nonprofit leadership. And so I'd say, oh, and also people who have lots of contacts, because really the foundation board serves as ambassadors for the college. And so that's their number one thing, is they help us to spread the message about how great MPC is and why people should support us. So that's I think, the overview of what we're looking for.
How long are the terms of your board members at this point?
They are 3 years, and typically board members will serve 2 consecutive terms. So that's a total of 6, and then they have to take a year off before they can come back. So, and we do have people who have come back after their year off.
Awesome, thank you. Any other questions for Becky? All right, seeing none, we'll go to any questions for the Vice President of Academic Affairs. No comments. Oh, yes, Trustee Dundas.
I had a question about the, what does it mean to be Microsoft certified? That was part of Dr. Cannoli's report.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the question. One of the things that our business and technology program has been exploring over the past few years is aligning our curriculum on campus, the college classes that our students take, with industry standard certification. And in our computer science program, they've done that quite successfully, in that when students take some of our computer science courses, they get Cisco certified, which is an industry recognition of a certain level of expertise in the computer networking field. Microsoft also has its own industry certification, and through the great work of our faculty in business skills, they've actually modified the curriculum over the past year, and now we teach curriculum that is directly aligned to the Microsoft certification. And so by taking the courses at MPC, you are also able to achieve that certification if you successfully pass the exam at the end of the course, although we do provide practice exams along the way. And so not only do you get to earn college credit and complete a college course in areas like Microsoft Word, Excel, or PowerPoint, but you can also achieve that industry recognized certification on top of the college class.
Thank you.
Trustee Stuck?
And I have a question for Dr. Cannoli also. In your report, John, you talked a lot about online classing, online class training, because there are different skills involved than just teaching in person. How are we doing on online training? How are our faculty doing? Have most of our faculty completed training? Do we have more to go? Is there a greater need that we haven't yet met?
There we go. Sorry, I muted myself again. That is a really great question. And I would like to say, thankfully, the stars aligned for us a year ago with the great work and support from our foundation. We had received a grant from the State Online Education Initiative that we largely focused around faculty training. And so through that grant, we had launched a series of training initiatives early in the spring. And we had already had a good number of faculty going down the route of getting through our course design academy and going through a variety of workshops that we'd been developing. And as a result of that effort, we've been able to get about 60 or 70 faculty members through the certification and training programs that we've offered as a result of that grant, and provide some incentive and support along the way for the faculty who are participating. On top of that, we've also built our own capacity by sending our faculty through, as I mentioned in the report, a peer online course review process where they get to learn how to apply the standards and how to coach their peers to improve their own classes. And that grant was really an incredible opportunity for us to build our capacity and to do some reinvigorating of our online training program. We still do have work to do. There are still faculty members who have not completed formal training, but we're very fortunate to have some folks like the peer online course reviewers, as well as Dr. Christina Nicolaides from psychology, and Jared Turner from Administration of Justice, who serve as our faculty online online faculty coordinators, and they serve as coaches and peers to their colleagues. They hold office hours regularly, meet with faculty, and they're helping many people make the transition. And I will just give the biggest shout out possible to faculty across the campus. Our faculty are working so hard, which is one of the reasons why I tried to focus my report on recognizing their efforts. But they're all in this together. They recognize that those who know the online teaching craft are sharing their expertise with each other. They're sharing their courses, they're sharing their strategies, they're meeting with one another and helping each other through this. With the great support of our faculty coordinators, our distance ed support team, our deans, and the faculty themselves, we are making it through this in a relatively straightforward manner. We're not hearing a lot of concerns or challenges at the moment, which is a good sign, although the world around us keeps throwing more concerns and challenges in front of us. But our faculty are resilient. They are working really hard to get through this and take care of their students. And the students are resilient too. They are working very hard to take care of themselves. And so our primary focus this semester is to take care of their needs and help them be as successful as possible. But we're also working to launch even more faculty training programs that will become part of our repertoire of professional development moving forward. And we look forward to being able to share that in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cannoli. I had one question that hasn't come up yet on your report. So at the end, there was a copy of an ad for the non-credit baking and pastry classes, and it had, these classes are traditional classes, now repeatable. So I was just a little confused about that. Can you explain that to me?
Yes, in fact, I'm glad you asked that question, and it's something that you're going to be hopefully hearing a little bit more about. We have the ability to serve the needs of our community and the needs of our students in a lot of different ways. And we know that our traditional for-credit classes meet a particular need, but we also know that in our career education world in particular, we have students that we serve who need skill development. They need to be able to learn skills that apply directly to work, and they're not necessarily interested in pursuing a college degree, or they're in fields like culinary arts that typically don't lead to a university transfer. They are really looking to develop their skills so that they can become employed. We've rolled out a new series of non-credit courses in the hospitality discipline this year, and we'll likely be doing this in some other areas like business skills and perhaps a handful of others as we explore the appropriateness of those. These kinds of classes are offered under the non-credit umbrella. And so a student who's not interested in earning college credit, who's not interested in fulfilling a degree, maybe they already have a degree, they're just interested in practicing their craft and learning the skills because they want to be employed in a restaurant, or they want to move into food service or hospitality. These are the kinds of courses that are designed to meet their needs. They also happen to meet the needs of our community. We do get many community members who want to learn to improve their baking and culinary arts skills, but these are really designed for industry, for people who are in industry looking to have a certain level of training that we can provide them with.
And how, if at all, does that interact with the student-centered funding formula and kind of performance-based funding approach?
Great question. Non-credit classes can fall into a couple of different categories. They can fall into traditional non-credit, where you'd often find things related to personal enrichment, which are funded at a lower rate. If it is something that falls under what we call short-term vocational training, which is typically in the career education world, or English as a second language, or certain very specific areas, they're funded at the full rate. And so our design of these programs is that these non-credit courses are part of an industry recognized certificate that we have created. And as such, they're considered short-term vocational non-credit classes. And so these are funded at the full FTES rate. They're actually funded at, just looking at FTES by itself, not taking into account the new metrics for completion, the FTES for these non-credit classes actually counts higher than our traditional college credit FTES now.
Thank you, Dr. Connolly. Any other? Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Stack.
Just a follow-up. If so, we're getting apportionment for it, but does that? But it's also repeatable. These courses are nonetheless repeatable. How does that work?
They are. They're really designed to focus on skill attainment, and again, the short-term vocational categorization of this is really how we framed this for the alignment with industry needs. And we are in the hospitality capital of the world, and so our non-credit baking and pastry arts, our non-credit wine program, and any other areas that I'm not thinking of at the moment fall into that category, but they also happen to be available to others who are of interest.
Thank you. Any other questions for Dr. Cannoli on his report? All right, thanks. All right, so next we'll move to the report from the Vice President of Administrative Services. Any questions for Mr. Hagler this evening? Dr. Stack, Trustee Stack? No?
No, I have questions. I just would like to have Steve amplify some of the things that he said regarding what's happening at the state level, because we'll end up talking a little bit about this later on too, but this is an appropriate time to prepare us for what the deferrals mean for us and all that stuff. That was in his report, but boy, we need to focus on these kinds of issues because they're going to hit us hard.
Agreed. My notes to myself were, that was clear as mud. But I thought you did a great job of adding a lot to it, so it was clear, but it was just, I'd love some additional help understanding.
I'd be great to answer. I'd be happy to answer a question if you want to frame one for me.
Well, so for me, I could understand when you took us through the numbers, but I guess I moved to down the road. And so with the deferral of any sort of apportionment and whatnot, I started thinking, what is the likelihood that those deferred monies will never be realized? That the state would say, you know what, you're not ever going to get them. And how much are we looking at out-year budgets and anticipating those revenues coming into them? And, what happens if, is there any reality to my thought that the state is just going to say, this money is never coming?
I think that in the short term, they've given us a budget where they pulled back on the cut that they had proposed in the May revise. So that was really good news. And the response to it was, but we're not going to pay you the cash. So similar to when we had deferrals in the past, these same questions came about, is that the deferrals continued for multiple years. And the question was asked each year whether or not the deferrals would become permanent. And so that is always the possibility. I think it primarily hinges on what happens in the state economy. And so if our economy recovers in the short or even in the medium term, the likelihood that we would not receive these revenues becomes much more remote. We would likely receive them. And in fact, from the previous deferrals early in the decade, 2012, 13, and 14, the state finally had just paid those off completely this past fiscal year when the economy was at its peak. So it could be a 7, 8, 9 year extended time frame of deferrals and repayments.
And so for MPC, do we end up looking at that, or traditionally, and maybe this might be a question for Mr. Martin, as one-time cash that come in, or how does that impact actual real-time budgeting?
Sure, and I can take the initial question, and thank you for that. In regards to the development of the budget, it is something that it doesn't necessarily impact a year-over-year budget because we budget for a fiscal year, but in regards to long-term projections concerning cash flow, that's something we would absolutely consider. In regards to meeting our expenditure obligations, that is something that won't necessarily be immediately impacted by the deferrals. Where we could potentially run into a challenging situation is that once the cash that we have collectively in the Treasury runs out, that's when we could potentially see some issues. But with approximately 40 million across all of our funds pooled together, the probability of running out of cash in a single fiscal year is relatively low at this point.
Which means, I take it to mean, we will be borrowing from our own reserves to cover the shortfall that would otherwise be coming from the state, at least in the short term. Is that correct?
Yes, as the board knows, we operate several funds here at MPC, and at the Treasury level, they don't differentiate between the different funds. It's just one collection of cash which they pull from.
So I had a question for Steve too, and it has to do with I still think you can correct me if I'm wrong because there have been changes since the last time I looked at any of this stuff, but I had heard at the time there were 9 districts that were not basic aid. So essentially we have 3 sources of funding, right? We have property taxes, and we have enrollment fees, and we have the backfill from the state. And districts that are basic aid have enough property taxes and enrollment fees to be more than the floor of funding that the state provides, so they don't get any extra money from the state. But then there are other 9, and everybody else does. And then but now there's 2 categories of schools that are among the non-basic aid districts. Those districts that are getting some apportionment this year, and then 9 districts which are getting none still. Is that still correct? Including us.
Well, as I have a table that's on, I think it's on the 3rd page, and it shows our TCR at 41 million, and then the local sources. And
What is TCR?
Total computational revenue. And so our very good. Our revenue includes the state apportionment, but also property taxes, enrollment fees, and EPA. And so the total amount of what they were doing was they were analyzing the amount of money that districts were receiving from their property taxes, the enrollment fees, and the EPA, and funding up to 76% of that total TCR. And this is just for the purposes of the advance. So that's the initial calculation that they do. They will revise this calculation come next February when we get to P1. So for this initial calculation, they said we want to make sure and provide an advance apportionment over the next 6 months to the districts who receive less than 76%, they would get some state apportionment. Those 9 districts and all of the basic aid districts were above that 76%, which included MPC. They have since now decided that they would borrow some of the categorical dollars and increase the apportionment percentage up to 18%. And so they did that, and we do get some cash between now and December as a result of this revision to the advance. So I know, Lauren, when you were looking at this 2 weeks ago, it was off of the initial advance calculation. So they did make that revision, and so I do have an analysis of that I can share as well. So we will get some money, but we're getting that money at the expense of the C grant. So it's really just by the Chancellor's office, it's a bit of shifting of the resources. All in all, as David alluded to, our cash is pooled together at the county level. And in our fund financial statements, the cash is pooled together between our general fund unrestricted and our general fund restricted. So C grant resides in the restricted fund. So when they reduce the cash for that to give it to us for the unrestricted general fund, the net effect of that is 0. We're still basically getting the same amount of cash. So now C is also impacted by deferrals, as well as our unrestricted general fund.
And C grant is what?
It's Student Equity and Achievement Grant. Sorry, I should have said that up front.
So what I think you're saying is we're on the order of 85% salaries and benefits, right? And we are being cut by the state with these deferrals, with these lost monies, so that we are now below what our salaries and benefits are. We were at 76% or 77%, but we were getting another 6% by taking away categorical funds to essentially fund our salaries and benefits, right? The unrestricted stuff. So that means that you just said this, but I want to make sure I understand it. That our C grant is now going to be short by that 6% that's migrating over to unrestricted. And we've been using that as restricted. Clearly, we could use unrestricted funds to pay for that, but we couldn't normally use restricted funds to pay for salaries and benefits, I would think. So do we have a way of, are we hurting our categorical programs, I guess is the question.
Well, I think, again, because our cash is pooled, the overall impact won't affect them. So what our responsibility now is to analyze the shortfall in cash that we have, and then make decisions about whether it will impact our cash flow. And so I'll be working to develop that cash flow analysis so that I can monitor it, so that if and when we need to make decisions related to cash flow, we have good information to make a sound decision. Right now, we have approximately $30 million in cash. So if we lost 10 of it, it's almost a third of our regular cash balance. It's not critical right now. There are other colleges who are more heavily impacted, but we need to watch it and monitor it and make sure that we make decisions based on that analysis.
Thank you. I just know it's very unclear and nobody understands it. So I'm grateful for your insights. Thank you.
Clear as mud.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Hagler? Okay, so before we deem that reports received, we'll look to the public if there are any comments on any of the reports that the board has considered under item 6. So the ASMPC, Academic Senate, CEA, CTA, or the Superintendent, President, and Staff reports. Again, if you go to the Participants tab, at the bottom you should see Raise My Hand, or you can click over More and you might see it there. If you're on the phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand. So, Trustee Steck.
Mary, when you do, did Larry Walker have a chance to give his report?
Oh, I'm sorry, Larry. I skipped right over you. Thank you, Lauren. That was in no way intentional. Any questions for the Vice President of Student Services? No comments? Marilyn, you're talking to yourself.
Well, I was just thanking Larry for the very complete report and noting how much is actually going on for our students, even though they are taking their classes remotely. Tremendous support.
Yeah. I really appreciated on the focus on the ARC resources and students with disabilities and making sure that they have accessibility. That was, I think, important area that I hadn't spent as much time thinking about. So I appreciated you drawing that to our attention. But it was very clear. It wasn't mud at all. It was like totally potable water. So. All right, so if there are no questions for Mr. Walker, again, do a quick and of the participants list any comments in general on those reports? Seeing none, we will deem all of the reports received. Thank you. And Doreen, the answer to your question is yes. All right, so there we will move to item number 7 on the agenda, which is our consent calendar. Is there any member of the board that would like to either pull an item for us first for a separate vote? Okay, or if you just want to make, and now if there's something you just want to make a comment or a question on, but would consider within a whole vote. So Trustee Steck, which item is that?
It's the monthly financial statement, item E.
Item E, okay. I had a question on item H and item K. All right. Is there any member of the public that would like to pull an item for a comment or question? Participants. All right, seeing none. We'll go ahead and have discussion on E, H, and K, and then hopefully take everything together. So Trustee Steck, item E.
I have to unmute myself, sorry about that. So the question that I have, this is the first month of the year, or this essentially the first month of the fiscal year. And usually we end up starting the year with a balanced budget in which our revenue and expenses sort of match exactly. And then time goes on and things change. But this year, we actually formally approved this just a month or two ago. But this year we're starting with a budget that isn't exactly balanced. The expenses are a little bit higher than our revenues. And that's true in the unrestricted general fund. And I suppose that's the one to worry about the most. And I was just hoping that we could be reminded about why we did that this year.
Yes, and if I may jump in there, Steve, were you unmuting yourself? Please feel free to jump in if you would like.
I am unmuted. So we had built into the tentative budget an 8% reduction. And then we made reductions to the corresponding revenue accounts and then the expenditure accounts. And right as I was finishing that process, striving to reach a balanced budget, we figured out that the election costs still needed to be budgeted. And so the deficit almost is equal to the anticipated election costs that will occur this year.
Thank you.
All right, so then I had a question on 7H, which is the Prop 55 EPA spending plan. So I was just wondering what the estimated revenue for the district from that revenue source was, if that information is known, or historically what it has been.
Sure, and I can go ahead and jump in there in regards to that question. And Mr. Hagler, please jump in if I miss something. But typically on an average year, MPC would receive approximately $5.5 to $6 million of EPA funds. Those funds are derived from income tax on high wealth individuals. That number that we received in the last several years of 5.5 to 6 million is expected to significantly decrease with the impact of COVID-19 and ultimately the reduction of income and income taxes paid by taxpayers in California. So typically we're between 5.5 and 6 million, but as we move forward in the next year or two, we are expecting to see a decrease in that amount.
Thank you. Trustee Johnson?
Yeah, mine was just maybe an observation, but also a little bit of a question. I noticed on our self-insurance, our health insurance, that it was 14.8%. Now, that's high for 1 month, but we all know that during the year, it goes up and it comes down. With that said, I obviously have concerns about COVID and how that's going to impact us Thank goodness we haven't seen an impact really from the fires on people, but COVID really scares me as we go into the year. And I do know that we have insurance. We have extra insurance if the number goes really high on a particular person. But I'm still concerned about it. So I think this is an observation, not a question, but I think it's something we need to be extremely aware of starting this fiscal year.
Thank you, Trustee Johnson. All right, so then the last one I had wanted to ask a question about was 7K. So appreciate everyone moving quickly to work on this MOU. In the preamble, it sort of indicates that the district is, choosing to move forward distance learning approach. I don't know, maybe I'm very sensitive because I work for the county and I spend all my time thinking about COVID, but I do think that part of the reason that we are in distance learning is because of where our monitoring metrics are and the statewide directive from our governor that, basically says at this point, Monterey County cannot provide in-person instruction. And so it was just a little bit of language that wasn't necessarily just our choice to do that, but there are extenuating circumstances and other folks that are making decisions that impact that. And it's neither necessarily here nor there, not something to change it about, but just a point. And then I did have a question at the end. The MOU indicates that the agreement expires at the conclusion of the fall 2020 academic semester, but there are references throughout the MOU about activities that are going to be happening in this semester. And so I was just wondering about the timing on when it ends and when some of the activities are actually going to be taking place, and if the end date needed to be adjusted or whatnot.
And thank you very much for that question, Chair Anderson. It is a great question because of the wording and the overlap of two different semesters. We were scheduled to do several rounds of faculty evaluations this fall. And ultimately, based on the circumstances, the MOU permits the transition of those scheduled evaluations to the spring. So ultimately, the life of the MOU goes through the end of the fall semester, but ultimately the impact of the MOU being recognized in the fall will trickle into the spring, because that is when we will perform the agreed upon evaluations that were originally scheduled in the fall.
So does that look like the MOU potentially coming back later in the year extension date? Or because it says it ends at the end of the fall semester.
So no, the original MOU as proposed this evening would not come back for an extension. Ultimately, if we do return to face-to-face instruction this spring, we would ultimately identify the evaluations that were waived this fall based on the MOU and then perform them in the spring.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. That's good. Okay. So with that, with the questions and comments on 7E, 7H, 7K, I would entertain a motion from the board to approve the consent calendar items 7A through P.
No move.
I move approval of the consent calendar.
I heard Trustee Green first. Would you mind seconding, Trustee Dunn-Gustafson?
Yes, I'll second.
All right, thank you. All right, so we have a motion and a second. We already called for public comment, so we'll go ahead and have a roll call vote.
Chair Yuri Anderson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lauren Steck,
Yes.
Trustee Rosalind Green,
Aye.
Trustee Marilyns Gustafson,
Aye.
Trustee Rick Johnson.
Aye.
That is unanimous.
Great, thank you. It is 5:30. Does anyone need to take a quick bio break, or are you good to keep
No,
going?
I I would recommend that we do item A under new business, because I note that our legal counsel has been in attendance the entire meeting, and I think it would behoove us to consider that and then take our break after.
That sounds good to me. Is everybody okay with that? All right, great. So we'll go ahead and hear item 8A, which is an action item. Accept the quit claim deeds and the terms, covenants, and restrictions therein for parcels at the former Fort Ord granted from the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. Mr. Martin.
Yes, thank you, Chair Anderson. And after a 20-year wait, the evening is upon us. In front of the board this evening, we have the 7 parcel deeds from the final dissolution of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. If the board does accept these deeds, MPC will officially become owners of these 7 parcels. As outlined in the board item under the background information, each parcel does come with a set of restrictions based on the Army's land use covenants, as well as subsequent habitat management agreements and plans that MPC will ultimately have to implement and abide by upon potential acceptance of the land. We are excited to propose this to the board this evening for the consideration of acceptance, and we do have Mr. Michael Harrington here, District's counsel for the Fort Ord dissolution process, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Any questions from the board on this item? All right, seeing none, I will turn it over to the public. Are there any members of the public that make a comment on item 8A? If you're on the phone, you hit *9 to raise your hand. All right, again, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to this board. Does any board member want to make a comment on the item? Mr. Johnson.
I just never thought it would come before Marilyn and I left the board. And that's only 9 years. I know, Lauren, you've waited many more years for this. So I'm excited to vote on it. And it was a long time in coming.
Trustee Stack.
So that's correct. I've been on this board 17 years and I've never seen a document like this in that whole time. It's an amazing experience. And with that, may I be honored to make the motion.
We have a motion.
May I second it?
All right, motion by Trustee Stack, second by Trustee Johnson. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Certainly. Chair Uri Anderson?
Yes.
Vice Chair Lauren Stack?
Yes.
Trustee Rosalind Green?
Aye.
Trustee Marilyn Dunn Gustafson?
Yes.
And Trustee Rick Johnson?
Yes.
That is unanimous.
Great. All right. Yay. Okay, so why don't we go ahead? It's by my clock, it says 5:34. If we can return at, say, 5:45 and continue with our meeting from there. So we'll take, if you can mute yourselves and turn your cameras off. See you in a few minutes. There's my girl behind that picture. Okay, so we are now on item 8B. It's an action item to approve the board self-evaluation process, timeline, and survey for 2020. So we have Trustee Stack and Trustee Dean as that ad hoc committee. So if you want to share with the board some of your thoughts and work you've done.
Sure. Either Rosalind and I can tag team, but I don't see her, so I can't tell when she wants to come talk. Every year we do a self-evaluation, and our self-evaluation is really a 360 evaluation. We evaluate ourselves, and we have everybody else we can think of evaluate us at the same time. And that we're going to continue that tradition with this particular iteration of our board self-evaluation. We have a couple small changes that we should go over, that I want to go over with you. The first one has to do with the length of our survey. The survey has always been a several page long survey. And when we started doing a different style of board goals a year or two ago, we also started evaluating ourselves on our performance on those board goals a few years, for the past year or two. As it turns out, most people respond negatively to extremely long surveys. And so Rosalind and I decided to split the survey into two separate sections. Trustees, the 5 of us, are going to get all of the 2 different sections of the survey. One is the rating scales that we have always used, and the other is an assessment of our performance on how we accomplished the goals that we set for ourselves a year ago. The people who are evaluating us outside of us on the 360 side are not going to get our performance on those goals, because Rosalind and I kind of figured that most people wouldn't have a clue as to whether or not we've accomplished those goals. So we didn't want to bore people and add error variance into our own things. So we're going to give the 1 survey to everyone else, and the 2 surveys to the 2 of us, to the 5 of us. That's the first change relative to last year. There are some very minor wording changes that we did, nothing particularly substantive. And the other change that we did was we decided to compress the timeline a little bit. So the timeline anticipates our doing the final step in this process in the November board meeting, or at least it had contemplated that. And the November board meeting will be the very last board meeting of Marilyn and Rick, and maybe my last board meeting too. So we thought that, gee, what we ought to do is figure out a way to at least have our final step be in October rather than in November. And we're doing that by compressing essentially some time at the very front end, which is right now. If the board chooses to approve the instruments, the 2 instruments as they appear now, then we can be in the field as soon as tomorrow. If we're going to make changes, then it'll take a little bit longer, because those changes will have to be put into the documents. But the hope is that we can approve the thing now, get it in the field now, get it out of the field in 3 weeks, and have all the steps gone through by the time our October board meeting comes around. But that's essentially it. Am I missing anything, Rosalind? I saw you shaking your head.
No, you're not missing anything.
There you are. Okay. So that's what it is. The 2 portions of the 2 different instruments. One is very similar to what we've done every year for many years, and the other is essentially a statement and an assessment of each one of the board goals that we decided on ourselves last year. And the assessment is, did we complete them, or are they still in progress, or did we have to start them? Something like that.
I'm sorry, you were glitching. I don't know if that was on my side or on yours. I didn't hear that last part.
I'm very glitchy all the time. I said that the scale that we're using for the board goals that we are going to assign, that we're going to assess ourselves on, are, have we completed that goal? Is that goal still in process? Or have we not started the goal? Essentially, very simple little thing. Just to jog our memories about, oh, we didn't do that one, if there are any that we haven't done.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the trustees? Go ahead,
um,
Trustee.
I might be here a little sooner than we should. When we're looking at the people that the evaluations will go out to, I would suggest that we make sure we send them to all the candidates. I think that's a good idea, so that we can, because new board members will be coming on in the process of this. So right at the end.
I think that's an excellent idea. And Joreen, can you add them, all the candidates? Is that possible?
Yes, they'll actually be on the list already because they are part of the community that newsletters and that sort of thing goes out to. And so they've all pretty much have wanted that. So yes.
Joreen, I have a fabulous idea, and you've already been there and already taken care of it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I just wanted to get some clarity on one thing. You said that between the materials we received and what you said is different. So the last attachment in our packet, attachment 8, has a draft recipient list, and it indicates that individuals highlighted will receive the full survey. All others will receive a shortened version survey. And there are more than just the trustees highlighted. And so I wanted to make sure I understood the full survey would be the addition of the evaluation on our performance or our activity related to the board goals. And is what's in the packet the recommendation, or what you stated?
Yes. No, I misstated it. I was too left-handed, too short, too quick. Yes, the people who are mostly who are on this Zoom meeting are going to get the whole thing, because they know us. They know what we're doing. They understand the board goals. They're mostly the people who are going to get the board goals are us plus the administration, essentially, the top level people who come here. Yeah.
I would personally recommend that the Academic Senate president receive the full survey as well. I feel like Adria has been very engaged with our board member meetings over the past year, and probably would have some ability to comment upon our progress against those goals.
I have no problem with that whatsoever.
Okay.
And anyone else you'd like to add? I have no problem at all. The more the merrier.
Yeah. Okay, and then the other question I had, I want to make sure I'm understanding, is related to the compaction of the timeline and what you define as the final step. And my understanding of the final step is this board adopting a set of goals for the calendar year 2021. And so I want to make sure I'm understanding that the committee is recommending that this board adopt goals for 2021 in October, before the new board is seated. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is correct. And you'll see in attachment, is it attachments E? It's called attachment E, has the timeline, and highlighted are the dates that have that we are now thinking of. And you can see the very end is October 28th, we vote on the goals.
So can you and Trustee Green talk about why you feel like that is an appropriate step to take? Because I'm particularly uncomfortable with that part of the recommendation.
Well, that's an interesting question. The question is, who should set the goals? And what we've tried to do last year was we moved the process, for 2 years ago, moved the process forward so that it was the new board members who set the goals. And what we had kind of learned from that process, and you can correct me if you disagree, but what we kind of learned from that process is new trustees may not have the to actually different kinds of goals, and it's good to step into.
You glitched out again. New trustees may not have what?
Sorry. Oh, sorry. New trustees may not have the I can't remember the word that I used, but it's essentially the depth of understanding to set, potentially anyway, to set meaningful goals for themselves. And they might work better by at least for the first year, seeing what the board had thought the goals ought to be. The question is, who should set the goals? People who, especially in this year when we have at least 2 new people coming on, should they be in charge of setting their own goals, or should they learn from what has been the experience in the past? And you could argue either way on that, and we came down on the side of doing it early rather than doing it late. But you could, I suppose, argue that it's appropriate for people the new board members, to come in and set their own goals.
May I?
Yeah.
Having been part of both those, and certainly 2 years ago, I think we finally passed our goals in March, because we did want new board members to be part of that. And I'm wondering if there's a way that we can maybe vote on these in October, and in November or December have them ratified by the new board, so that there is a buy-in. Because I think it's very difficult to bring new board members on and say, here are your marching orders. So if you would consider that.
Couldn't do it in
even
November.
makes sense.
So the November, clearly they will be seated in December. So they couldn't do it in November, but we could do it as early as December or later than that.
December would work. Anyway, I'll throw that out.
Mm-hmm. So I guess I look at it from the perspective of having been that new board member who was coming in, and do feel like new board members come to the table with perspective on what the board should be working on, and should be afforded an opportunity to give voice into the goals of the board that they are seated on. And as I recall, the first set of goals that were before this board for ratification, between the time that I was elected but not seated, one of the goals was make new board members feel welcome, which I don't think is a meaningful goal. I think actually
we tried hard not to.
So I guess I can understand the desire to help set the board up for success and marching order. And I feel like we've done a lot of work over the last 2 years as a board to try and have meaningful goals that are aligned with the work of the district and the campus and moving things forward. But again, I just feel really uncomfortable with the idea that this board is just this board that is not going to be the same board, despite the fact that several members will continue. Would just hand that to those people and say, here's what you're supposed to work on, versus saying, go through this process, maybe get to October and say, here's what we think is the important work for the board in the coming year, and then give them the opportunity to say, we adopt these goals and that we own these goals. There's a very big difference between buy-in and ownership. And I feel like the board's goals are the board's goals, and the people who sit on the board should own them. So everything that you've put forward makes a whole lot of sense to me. That is the only part of the recommendation that I have that really rubs me the wrong way. And that I think that we should be thinking about, not from our perspective, but from the people that are going to be at this table leading the college. So I see Rosalind has unmuted herself, if you'd like to say something.
I did. So like yourself, Yuri, I came in, it was a year after election, but still in time that this conversation was happening, because it's an annual conversation. And I think I came to the consensus and agreement with this process because for me, I felt that it would be helpful to already have some goals, set, and an idea, unless the person coming into the seat is someone that comes to the board meetings every month and already has a sense of the operation of the board. It's one more, I don't want to say task, but it's one more piece, a process that can already be in place just to get you through those first several months while you're learning what your job actually is, right? So to me, it would act as a guideline for, once, you're in and you're working, and then, so like Rick's recommendation of ratifying, makes a lot of sense. But again, is that too soon? So we can kind of all go back and forth on it. I'm fine either way, but I felt like, yeah, let's line up some things, from those of us that have been here now doing this. If a board member comes on and says, this doesn't make a lot of sense, I mean, we'll be open for the discussion, right? But I just think that having some guidelines there already in place is a welcoming mat. That was my perspective on it.
I can definitely see the idea that here is what we think is important. But I have to say, I really am discouraged. I mean, have had this board sometimes likes to act like we know better than everyone else. And we don't know better than everyone else. We take the information we have, we make the best decisions that we possibly can, but trying to control the behaviors of other people before they have an opportunity to bring their voice forward, I find it problematic. And that's how this feels to me. I think that we're providing you with what we think is the best possible thing based on our experience, but you said, they'll have an opportunity to consider, or will reconsider if someone has another thought. It has been my experience on this board that it's very difficult as a new board member to some of those ideas considered.
I think maybe we also need to be looking, because we have elections every 2 years. This is probably something that should be done in January, when after if there are new board members are seated. Mm-hmm. And I'm going back to Yuri. I have to say, when you came on board and the other new trustee came on board, it took us a couple months to really put it together. Mm-hmm. And perhaps that should always be done in January.
I tend to agree. Maybe the timeline is off, but
the timeline exists as it is, and this is actually a change in the timeline, but the timeline exists as it is in the current board policy. Not the final meeting was supposed to be November, not October. So we were trying to move it up as much as we could, or change it as much as we could. But the historical reason why we chose this time to do it was because we didn't want to interfere with the evaluation of the superintendent president, which has its own timeline typically. And we're interacting with the same people, asking the same people for the same 360 kinds of things for the superintendent as well as us. And I believe in the old days, the board considered that it was more important to not burn out the people who were going to do our things by doing our things, and make sure that they were fresh and strong about doing the presidential evaluation. So that's the reason why we did it. There's no reason to not change the whole thing entirely. But I do think that, well, I can tell you what they do in the CCLC training, which is congratulate people on getting elected, and they all got elected, typically because they have points of view and things they want to accomplish. And typically what the training tells you is, okay, now you got to learn a whole new set of skills. You have to realize that you have zero authority as an individual, that you only have authority as a part of a group of 5 or 7 people. And you got to kind of get together, and that takes time. And also, it's the case that our board goals ought to be aligned with the college goals. What we're trying to do is, the board goals are not, we're going to have 5 parties every year. The board goals are, we're going to do this, we're going to accomplish this. And those things are all vetted by all of the constituencies in the college. And our thing, or they are told to us by the chancellor. We have a number of goals now that are told to us by the chancellor. We really don't have much latitude in acceptance of those particular things. So I can certainly see the other side of it, but I also think it's a lot that you get a lot. I use the term error variance periodically. You get a lot of error variance when you have people who are just coming in, setting the goals at that moment in time. Now, maybe we do it 6 months later, which is fine. That's certainly another time to do it. Then we just have to adjust how we do it vis-a-vis the evaluation of the superintendent president.
This isn't going to be a debate. I'm going to drop out in a minute. I actually would go forward with what you just said and say this ought to be done at the beginning of every fiscal year, which is pretty much how our college runs anyway, by the fiscal year. But I do think I do like the idea of perhaps the new board ratifying them, but I think it's critically important. Jareen, you already told me you've taken care of it with getting the evaluations out, but the candidates must be included, I believe, in those more complete evaluations, the ones the trustees and the presidents are doing, because they're running for a reason. So they must have a knowledge of MPC. That would seem logical to me. But I do think the voice of new trustees must be included in any goals that they're going to be responsible for.
But then the choices that I see it as right now are either we can drop this and take it up in 6 months, or we could try to do it this way and then try to change it for next year. Right? Because I agree, that's compelling. Now, what you mean, Rick, I think, is that you want to see the process end in June or July. You say not start, because we're starting the fiscal year now. This is the start of the fiscal year.
Absolutely. So, but I also think that we may be able to go ahead and do it right now, the way you're setting it up, and do it again in June. And maybe these are our goals to get us to that point where our new trustees are comfortable doing this. And being I won't be here, I don't mind loading that work on you at all to do it again in 6 months.
Yeah, that'll be up to the new board, of course.
Well, I think an examination of the timeline would be really important, because knowing who I am, this is going to be something that I always feel that we should be providing an opportunity for trustees that are coming on to have a voice in the goals they're setting. And I realized that was not an issue for a really long time, because y'all were, just going along.
But if we if we finish the process in June, say, so that the new board goals start with the July meeting, that does mean that the new board will be beholden to the old board's goals for the 6-month period. There's never a clear time to cut it. So no matter what, we're going to have this problem. The question is, how soon do you want the board to buy into its own goals?
Yeah. Well, it seems like that in that case, you're halfway through a year and you're coming in and you're finishing it out. But let's see.
Joey has to say something.
Yeah, go ahead, Joey.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, but we do have to have the goals along with your meeting schedule and who are the officers of our board to MCOE before their first meeting of the year. So it does need to be done before January. The time that we did it in March, I was getting phone calls and emails every day from MCOE asking when are we going to get them. And because we had new board members and there were other delays, I was able to hold them off, and they had an understanding. But typically, we do send that information in after the organizational meeting in December.
Interesting.
So for the reasons that Lauren Steck commented on is, and Rosalind kind of touched on as well, is that when the new board comes in, the knowledge isn't as great as you have the following year. And then that way you can be on the ad hoc committee and help along with the goals. But it's to
Thank you for the
formulate.
information on the MCOE. I think that's an important bit of information that we did need. And it seems like it would be appropriate to check with them to see if we were to move to a fiscal year based schedule, if a resubmission of, you know, goals that were, say, approved at a June timeline could be submitted in a December and then carry through. It seems like that is a question that we could ask. Why don't we?
I just wanted to say one more thing too, keeping in mind that we won't necessarily have new board members every year. It seems a little odd because this is an election year, you know, but next year at this time, board members will have been on, you know, in the seat for several months. And so I think that it's really a good medium, you know, to come in with, you know, some goals set. It's almost like when you're getting a job and you have your job descriptions and your goals and things set like that, and then when you get in, you have, you know, evaluation. It's when you and the supervisor discuss, you know, what could be different. So it's kind of just like a medium way. But I'm good with whatever we decide, and that's why this is part of the process, so that not just two board members is making the decision, but we bring it back so that all of us can weigh in and then make a decision from that point.
So why don't we take it to the public for any comments on the discussion at hand, which is the recommendation from the ad hoc on the process, the timeline, the surveys, the individuals who will receive the full survey versus the shortened survey, the whole shebang. So if anyone would like to make a comment, please raise your hand. Go to the participant tab and find raise your hand at the bottom or on the left next to more, or if you're on the phone, you can *9. All right, I'm not seeing any. I did get a comment in chat that perhaps the director of admissions and records and the assistant to the superintendent president should be included in the full evaluation, full survey list. So, which isn't problematic to me.
Yeah, if they're not in there, they should be in there. That was an oversight.
Okay.
It turns out it's just it knows us.
Yeah. All righty. So let's see. Why don't we take it this way? If we could bifurcate the motion into separate things. One would be approving the survey, the full survey and the shortened survey, and the list of survey recipients with the couple of edits that we've made. And then a second motion related to the timeline and the process, if that was okay with folks. So I would entertain a motion to approve, if there's no more comments from the board, conversation.
I'll move the first part.
All right, so move to approve the survey,
Second.
the admin, and the recipient list with the amendments. Okay, second by trustee Johnson, motion by trustee Stack. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Chair Yuri Anderson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lauren Steck,
Yes.
Trustee Rosalind Green,
Aye.
Trustee Marilyn Dunn Gustafson. Unmute. Unable to mute.
We hear you.
She says,
Okay, yes.
thank you. And Trustee Rick Johnson.
Yes.
Great, so I think that was unanimous. So then the second thing that we would take up is the evaluation timeline and process. So would someone like to articulate a motion for that?
Well,
I see a couple of things. We have accept the committee recommendation. We've had trustee Johnson offer a amendment that would be to accept the recommendation of the committee, but add a ratification by the newly seated board in December or something else. And I heard trustee Stack start to lean in and say something.
Well, I'll make that motion too. I'll make my motion, which is the original motion with the addendum by Rick, which is we make sure that at, I don't know if it's the first meeting, maybe by the second meeting, by January, we ask them to ratify the goals.
I would
I will second.
All right, so a motion by trustee Stack to approve the timeline as presented by the ad hoc committee with the amendment that by January, the board would ratify the action of this board, with a second by trustee Dunn Gustafson. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Oh, can I clarify that motion, please? And so it's as stands, but with the ratification being in January by the board for the timeline and process, or the board goals.
Yes, the ratification of the board goals by January of 2021.
Excellent. And now I will take a verbal roll call with Chair Yuri Anderson.
No.
No. Vice Chair Lauren Steck.
Yes.
Trustee Rosalind Green.
Aye.
Trustee Marilyn Dunn Gustafson.
Yes.
And Trustee Rick Johnson.
Yes.
The motion moves.
Great, thank you. And I do want to thank trustee Steck and trustee Green for your work on this, getting together so quickly and moving us forward. All right. So next we have item 8C, which is an information item. The first read of MPC's ACCJC midterm report. And I guess, Mr. Martin, you're going to start it off, or should we turn it to Mr. Pacheco?
Yes, Chair Anderson, I'll have a couple of brief comments for the board and the public as Dr. Pacheco unmutes himself and prepares for his brief presentation this evening. But we are halfway through our 7-year accreditation cycle. Being that we're halfway through, we are required to submit a midterm report. This report is standard for the 7-year accreditation process cycle, and every district and every college that is accredited by the ACCJC is required to submit a midterm report. Dr. Pacheco will introduce some of the highlights of the report that's in front of the board for a first reading tonight. Ultimately, we will take any comments and feedback that the board has, as well as some final comments from the campus, and ultimately prepare a final read or a second read for the board in the coming weeks, prior to a submission date on or before October 15th to the Accrediting Commission. And with that said, I'll pass it over to Dr. Pacheco, our Dean of Pre.
Good evening, trustees and President Martin, everybody present tonight. One of the roles I have as the Dean of Pre is I am the college's accreditation liaison officer. And my role as the ALO is to act as an intermediary and get the information together, to get the folks working on projects, bring them together and get in contact with the commission. So that's my role tonight of why I'm here. I wanted to lay out again, President Martin has laid it out for you, but we are at the halfway point in our accreditation cycle. And in the cycle itself, you might remember that in the previous years, we submitted some progress reports. We'll talk about those a little more in detail in a couple of slides. But we are at halftime and we're moving on to the next portion of our accreditation cycle, which is the writing process itself. I guess my only admonition for the colleges and for the board to consider is that while it looks far away that ICER might be in 2023, the writing process as it begins is not that far away. And as you can imagine, as you think about the process of building writing teams and gathering evidence, we'll be getting started on the writing process soon after the midterm report submitted and approved by the commission. I want to explain a little bit about the document itself, and notice the heading for the slide is compliance and improvement. And there are two kinds of recommendations that the accrediting commission delivered to colleges, and that is compliance and improvement. And a compliance recommendation is precisely that. We don't meet the standards. And when a college does not meet the standards, the accrediting bodies are required to contact the U.S. Department of Education for two reasons. One, for a college, when a college is accredited, then it can then award a financial aid. And then secondarily, our units are transferable. So whenever there's an issue of compliance, the US DOE is contacted and the 2-year rule starts. And that's what was accomplished in those two progress reports that were submitted in the previous years. And as you might remember, the college did have an issue on compliance, but those have been completed. You're in good standing. We have the letter from the commission approving our work to date. So that portion of the equation, that portion of a recommendation is done and in good situation. The other kind of recommendations that come out are improvement recommendations. And that is a conclusion that you meet the standard, but we think that you should do some stuff that if you get it done, it's really gonna improve what you're already doing, or it's going to get you nudged along the way to become better. So two recommendations, compliance and improvement. Compliance is handled separately. We've already dealt with that, and we are dealing with improvement recommendations in our midterm report. The second portion of it is the actionable improvement plans. And when you hear AIP, think recommendations we make to ourselves to improve. So both the improvement recommendations that come from the commission and the actionable improvement plans, things we say we know we got to get better at, come together in the midterm report. But they're really a progress reporting document and a notion of collegial involvement in getting better as an institution. That's really the role and purpose of the midterm report. A couple of things to consider about these improvement recommendations and the AIPs are they are recommendations, suggestions based on existing systems we have at the college. So the commission and ourselves recognize that we have the system in place to fix these things. They just need to be better connected. So we may have an issue with SLOs. but we have a learning assessment committee and we have an academic senate. So we have the system in place to make the improvements. We've just got to get them acted and get them together to get the project done. What you'll also see inside the midterm report is the quality focus essay. And when you see quality focus essay, think innovation plan. And unlike the actionable improvement plans and the recommendations, our quality focus essay, our innovation plan, which dealt with our enrollment management system and getting a learning management system at the college, that's out of the box thinking. In other words, our systems in place, we're not able to get them together. And what the Commission is trying to get colleges to do is think within your systems to make improvements. And when you recognize that your systems that are in place are not going to get you where you need to do, we want you to do out of the box thinking. And this out of the box thinking is contained in a quality focus essay. And the essay itself relates what we want to do overall to innovate and create new things that we want to do in the college. So that's another component of the midterm report that you're going to see. The third part is what's called institutional performance update. And when you read the accreditation standards, without question, the most common combination of words are learning and achievement. Everywhere you go, learning and achievement. Show us how the mission is supporting learning and achievement. Show how planning is supporting learning and achievement. And that's what you see in these two areas. An update on student learning assessment, what's been progressing, what's happening, what are some challenges going forward. And you see that contained in our midterm. The second portion is institution set standards. That's on the achievement side. And what an institution set standard is the introduction of benchmarking, the notion of building floors, recognizing where we are, and setting aspirational goals for improvement. So those are measures which we would then use to measure progress on our mission and our educational master plan goals. So you'll see updates in there as well on progress we made on learning and progress we've made on setting floors, current levels of performance, and stretch goals or aspirational goals we are setting for ourselves to improve on the achievement side. So a little bit about how the document itself is put together. One of the things that if you've had a chance to take a look at the document, one of the recommendations made by the team and we made ourselves is that we needed to clarify in our work at the college 3 key areas: operations, governance, and working conditions. And that by making it clearer in the work that we do, you see that we created an integrated planning handbook, and you see that we created a resource guide. Those are things that we've done to really clarify the varying tasks that happen at the college. What I'm trying to show on page 10 over here is how these things were delegated either to operational or to governance bodies to handle the particular tasks or the improvements that we needed to be made, also with the quality focus essay. So you'll see on page 10, the people who were delegated to be the subject matter or content experts to provide the information that would work with me in helping to produce the document. So what I've attached, and you can click on the green corner of the document that we provided, which is actually a full PDF. I just wanted to be able to share with the board that this is not something new or recently started. Work on these recommendations, work on these AIPs, and work on the quality focus essay began right away after the last time that the accreditors came out. So I have the pages displayed here for visual effect, but if you want to see a full and complete version of what I've captured visually, you can just click on the PDF I have in the corner. But this was progress measured, so as you can see in the document itself, recommendations or AIPs were assigned to people or signed. They were analyzed and information and data collected along the way about how we were making progress on those. And then ultimately a conclusion of whether we accomplished what we said we were going to do or whether we were able to complete what the commission asked us to do. So the full document's located on the PDF itself, but this is to kind of let you know That work was assigned back in 2017, continued in 18 and 19, and during 2020, we've actually wrapped up a lot of the work and then began the reporting of what we do. So you can see that we have 5 recommendations. They appear out of order only because the recommendations 6, 7, 10, 11, and 12 were the improvement recommendations 1 through 5 and 7 and 8 and 9. Those were actually compliance recommendations that we dealt with. We spoke about those in the progress reports. So they've all been addressed. But the recommendations for improvement were number 6, 7, 10, 11, and 12 that came from the commission in the report back then. And on the right-hand side, you see the particular areas that the commission felt that we needed to work on, and you can see a nudge or direction to get us to use data better, and you can see that in recommendations 7, 10, and 11. And the college has done exactly that, right? And use data and information to make better decisions. On the other side of the questions, you have the actionable improvement plans. There you see them numbered in order because they were the 8 things that we said we wanted to work on over the next couple of years. So notice though, you see similar themes, suggestions for improvement that the commission made and suggestions for improvement that we made to ourselves parallel a lot. Focus on student learning, you see the enrollment management, and a few other technical things, some staffing strategies we wanted to implement. But an AIP number 8 on the bottom, the improved planning and decision structures, that's what I was talking about when our ability to make better decisions and connect them with the operations to get there. So what you see summarized here are the areas that we identified a few years back that we said, you know what, we're doing okay, but we want to focus on these to get better. The quality focus essays, remember, those are really the innovation plans that are happening at the college, the thinking outside the box, getting us to do things that are different to be able to outreach where we need to do. And back in 2016, the college identified 2 critical areas, developing an enrollment management system that's to help the Office of Academic Affairs to build better schedules, to use data to be able to develop other course scheduling, scheduling over multiple years, scheduling in varying locations like Marina, online. It's a tool that has been developed at the college to be able to use evidence and information and track it. The second area of innovation was the purchase of TrackDat. The time when the commission came out last time in 2016, we had a lot of learning outcomes assessment work, but it was in varying locations, in spreadsheets, in Word documents. And what the college did back in 2016, 2017 was to expend the funds necessary to be able to buy a single system that tracks and houses all of the learning at the course, program, and general education levels, the methods of assessment, ways that they can then fold and migrate that into the program review, which is a necessary part of what you do with the learning findings. On that institutional performance, I'd like to point out a couple of things. Over the last 3 years, without question, the college has institutionalized student learning efforts much more. You now have a pre-committee. There's a functioning LAC, Learning Assessment Committee. There is a system itself, the learning management system to track it. So the improvements that we reported in the document to the commission was how we've built better tracking systems and how we've really institutionalized the processes. You also see a growth in the area of folding in learning assessment findings into program review along with the achievement part. On the institution set standards, a couple of main good things that the college has done in the past. The college has set floor and aspirational goals of what was asked of the commission to be able to be done at that time. But in the past year, the college has now set floors and aspirational goals, the floors and stretch goals for improvement on each and every metric set by the federal government as implemented through the ACCJC. That was an important step for the college to sit back and say, we're not just going to do this gradually, we're going to set them all at this time. We're going to go beyond what's expected of us and get it done and show to the commission that we're willing to go beyond what has been traditionally expected. The second thing we did was we connected the state system, the Vision for Success. You've seen that in other presentations from pre and in other environments, but we will wind up doubling our work. We were doing work for the federal government on various metrics, and we were doing work for Sacramento, and they were defining them differently, and they were used different measures. Some were the same, some seemed to be the same. And what we did was request of the commission, and a hat tip to Rosaline Ryan of the pre-office who worked with the commission to be able to say, it would be a lot better for us. We'd be able to work smarter, not harder, if we were able to use the Vision for Success as our federal goals. And the commission saw the wisdom of that, agreed to it. So now what we've done is moved all those Vision for Success goals into our accreditation documents so that we reduce unnecessary and duplicated time. That was a big accomplishment. And then finally, when you looked at the EMP, if you recall, we folded these institution set standards into the educational master plan. So we have basically told the commission that we hear you, and we're going to put these institution set standards, these ways of measuring progress on our mission, which is one thing an EMP does. But what we're going to be able to do is use them as one of the ways we triangulate, the way we look at progress on the goals. So those, I think, were significant accomplishments by the commission, by the college over the last couple of years to be able to make, again, the two key components, student learning and student achievement, at the head of what we're focused on looking at. A little bit about this, and again, you see the heading again, participatory governance. I want us to be clear, and I want the commission to see that we're working on it, is that we worked this process of writing the document from spring through August, doing exactly what each component of the college should do. The operational parts, which is what I work on, I'm in the Office of Pre, of organizing and getting things done and setting up the structures so that the participatory governance part of the equation, the committees and the bodies such as the Academic Senate and AG and whatnot were able to do the work that they did of actually reviewing the content. So what's happening here in August, so we started in spring, but what's happening here in August is that the document is making its rounds through the governance system. You have actually a PDF, which is a snapshot of it from about a week or so ago. Continue work happens on the document itself. We're refining, do we have the best evidence, and is this quite worded properly, and do we have the right connection between what we're saying and what we're proving? Those things are happening daily. We're getting feedback from all of the participating groups. The reason why we wanted you to have it earlier as well is so that we could hear feedback from you. We didn't want to just submit you a final document that was merely rubber stamped. And what we felt was if we gave it to you as it was in the condition of being worked, get suggestions from you, then we could then continue to make those changes. And so when we come back as a second read, or if necessary, another meeting for approval, you would have seen where we were, provided feedback, and be able to then add some changes yourself. So I know it's a lot of information related to you. You also got a copy, a PDF of the document itself, but we'd be most interested in hearing some feedback and questions and insights we have from you. I did want to, if I could, take a moment to thank a lot of the folks who were writers in the document itself, people who have acted as editors and contributors, and people who have also created graphics. I'm afraid that if I list the 16 people I have on here, I'll undoubtedly forget someone. So I don't want to do that, but I want to be able to say that there's been remarkable contributions. A couple of folks on the line itself. I see Jeannie and I see Adria and Jennifer and Rosaline and others who have played a key part in getting the document together. But I'm open for feedback, questions, or any insights that you have on how we can make the document better. So when we come back to you, you see a document that you feel confident in approving, and we can keep our work going. The document itself is due on October 15th, so we've got some time to wrap it up, but I'm all ears.
Thank you, Dr. Pacheco. All right, feedback, questions, insights from the board. I'm going to start by admitting I have not looked at the full document. For whatever reason, when I was reviewing, I had 2 copies of the PDF presentation. I didn't have a copy of the actual document. So I'm seeing other heads shaking, so that wasn't just me. Dr. Stack?
I think that's correct. So none of us have really seen this document until this morning. We just got it for the first time this morning, and it's 16 pages? Is that?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not. I'll have comments probably. Well, I'll have comments probably, but we're not quite there yet, just because we just got the document. With an October 15th deadline, we have to approve it in our September board meeting, because October 15th is before our October board meeting, which gives us only one more meeting to go over this. So I'm not sure how we compress the procedure that Bob laid out for us about giving feedback, and then they'll rewrite and then come back to us before we approve it, because we kind of run out of time to do that unless we do something draconian like have another board meeting. So I'm not sure what to do, but I read the first third of it today, and I thought, with one typo, I thought it was great. So, and I think it's easy to read, and I think it's easily comprehensible and easy to understand. I was impressed, but I'm not done yet, and that's why.
But everybody has a copy now, is that correct? So evidently the attachment did include the PDF for the board doc. Okay, well, okay.
And I'm usually like all about computer, but would it be possible to get a printed version of this? This is one that I think I would like to look at, hold in my hands.
I don't think that'd be a problem at all.
Okay. Because as much time and energy and effort as you and the team are putting into this, I really do want to do my job and with you and provide feedback. And I just want to appreciate you for this presentation. It was very clear. It's very helpful. I think it will, for me, help guide how I look at the document and frame any sort of comments or questions I have. And then I saw, looks like Trustee Johnson is leaning in, and then I saw Trustee Dennison raise her hand. So, Rick?
I just also started it today when I got it. This is so critical to what we do. As much as I hate to say this, maybe we could do a 1 hour Zoom meeting before October 15th, where we really can just concentrate on this, because it's incredibly important. That's my comment.
Am I going to get an award for the most meetings in one calendar year?
I think we are all going to get pins that say we're Zoomers.
Marilyn, did you want to go before Trustee Stack? Sorry, go ahead.
No, all I was going to say is that I have not had a chance to read it either, because all I saw was the presentation PDF and not the full report.
Trustee Stack, go ahead.
So I think that Rick is already feeling the hurt of not being in board meetings, and so he's trying to make as many board meetings as possible, between now and the end of his tenure. I think that's the reason. But I like what you said. Yeah, and I like what you said, but I think that we need to turn it on its head a little bit. If the thing has to be submitted by the 15th, presuming we have more than trivial comments, they're going to have to work through those comments in order to get the document in the final form, which we would then approve either at a meeting, a special meeting, or approve it at our September board meeting as originally planned. Another way of doing it besides having a special board meeting after the September board meeting, but far enough in advance of the October 15th deadline so that they can actually make the changes, would be to have our special board meeting sometime 2 weeks from now, which gives us 2 weeks to come up with the comments, or 3 weeks from now, which gives us 3 weeks to come up with the comments and allows them to do the changes, and then we approve the final document in the September meeting. I wish there were another way of doing it, but I'm just seeing that if we really think we're going to have substantive comments, or we want to give ourselves the opportunity to have substantive comments, we kind of need to have another meeting one time or the other. I'm sorry about saying that.
Don't be sorry. I appreciate everyone wanting to lean in, and I think we all know how important this particular job is. So
It's
I know
also
that David and Joe Reed are stoked to schedule another meeting for us.
It's also important for the college as it shapes forwardly, proactively about what needs to happen over the next 3 years when we actually have the full and complete comprehensive visit, right? We want to be able to not only capture the snapshot of what we've done here, which is what the midterm really does, but also set the stage for making accreditation a priority as we go forward, right? With regular updates and information. We're happy to help.
Beautiful.
Okay,
All right.
so I think maybe the steps are that I will work with Jareen to make sure that everybody indeed has the copies. Now, I guess what we could do is, since we have this situation, is maybe send you a later version, because changes continue. So we can make maybe a snapshot PDF for you tomorrow and push that one to you, because then the document you're reading is actually one that we are more complete, right? It's a PDF of what we've been working on. And it's more current for you, right? Maybe we'll make a number of the changes. We've already made them for what you're particularly curious about. That makes sense? And then, well, thank you.
As long as that version is also publicly available. So that is, you know, if you're sharing something with the governing board, it's business of the board, and it's also business of the public.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for your time, and we'll come back and we'll see you certainly on in the September meeting, but before then.
Yes. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, folks.
All right. Well, I guess actually we should see if there's any member of the public that would like to make a comment on this information item before we completely close. Seeing none. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, trustees. Have a good evening.
You too. All right, so now we're on information item 8D, which is the Student Success 2020 presentation. And I believe that is Ms. Ryan, but I don't know if Mr. Martin, if you're gonna kick it off.
Yes, just to give Dr. Ryan a brief moment to pull up the screen, but we have consolidated some preliminary information to provide an initial insight as to our student population as we head into the fall semester. But also to touch base on some of the statistics that are starting to appear from the spring semester. As I'm sure Dr. Ryan will mention, the spring semester is still settling, as students have until the end of the calendar year to make determinations based on outcomes of spring coursework. So the numbers are still finalizing themselves. But ultimately, this presentation tonight will give the board and the public an initial insight as to the impact of the COVID-19 situation here at MPC. So I'll pass it off to Dr. Ryan.
Thank you. Can everyone see my screen and hear me okay?
Rosalie, if you can't hear us, we're all nodding our heads.
Okay. I'm just trying to advance. I'm having some technical difficulties. Okay. First, we're just going to talk about the outcomes for this presentation. Then I'll share some very brief notes on the data. Then we'll briefly talk about historical data on course retention and success rates, just to provide you with some background and context. Then we'll jump in and we'll talk about what the retention and success rates look like for spring 2020. And then finally, we'll look forward to what's happening for fall 2020, this current semester. So the outcomes for the presentation, by the end of this presentation, you will understand what course retention and success rates look like in typical semesters. You'll understand what course retention and success rates looked like for spring 2020. And you'll understand what strategies and interventions have been put in place to support students at the end of spring as well as this fall semester. Just a couple brief notes on the data. I'm pulling from a couple different data sources. One is our internal student information system and Zoho, and the other is from the Data Mart, which is a public data source that is produced by the Chancellor's Office. And we'll talk a little bit more about those two data sources later in the presentation. There are some terms that I'll use throughout the presentation. We'll talk about the distinction between face-to-face courses or instruction versus distance education. And you'll sometimes see those abbreviated as F2F and DE. It's important that you understand that there's a distinction between students, and this is the number of students where each student is counted once. This is also sometimes known as head count, versus the number of enrollments. And these are the number of courses in which students are enrolled. So for example, if one student is taking 3 courses, that's 3 enrollments for that student. Bear with me 1 second. My having a little bit of technical difficulty here. The next term you'll see is retention. And those are students who are retained or remain in their courses until the end of the semester, and they could have earned any grade from an A through an F. By comparison, success means that a student was retained in the course and they received a grade of an A, B, C, or a pass. Okay, let's briefly look at historical data on course retention and success rates. We'll talk about course success. And remember, these are grades of A, B, C, or pass. We'll look at MPC and statewide numbers in both face-to-face and distance education courses. And we're looking at this for 5 primary semesters from fall 2017 through fall 2019. First, I'm showing you a graph showing course success rates for face-to-face instruction. We'll start with that because most of the instruction statewide, as well as at MPC in a typical semester, is face-to-face. MPC is the bar that's burgundy in color, and statewide is the blue bar. And you'll see that the course success rates are comparable for MPC and statewide. And now we're looking at course success rates for distance education. And you'll see that both at MPC and statewide, the course success rates are lower for distance education than they are for face-to-face instruction. And I have pulled these data off the public Data Mart site. So one of the things that we regularly do at MPC is we disaggregate our data. We have a set of internal data dashboards that are available to anyone with an MPC login. And one of the data dashboards that is most frequently referenced is course success rates. Faculty and staff are able to go in and look at course success rates all the way down to the department and even the course level, and they can disaggregate by different student population groups. So for example, an instructor in a given area can look at their own course success rates, and they can disaggregate it by race and ethnicity, for example. What you're seeing right now is just a very high level view of data from the 5 semesters that we just looked at in the previous slide. These are course success rates disaggregated by race and ethnicity. What you're seeing here are just for students who actually reported their race or ethnicity. And you're seeing for groups where there were actually 100 or more enrollments over 5 semesters. Distance education are the blue bars, and face-to-face instruction are the red bars. And then you'll see that across all of these different groups of students, course success rates are higher in face-to-face courses than they are in distance education courses. And you'll also notice that some groups of students have lower success rates than other groups of students. And what I'm showing right now are the number of enrollments over 5 semesters. And remember, we're talking about the numbers of course enrollments, not the numbers of students. Okay, now we'll go ahead and jump into spring 2020 retention and success rates. So just to remind you, we talked about the distinction between the number of students, also known as head count, versus the number of course enrollments. And for these next couple slides, we'll actually focus on the number of courses in which students were enrolled. Okay, I'm going to show you, talk about retention and success in spring 2020. In spring 2020, there were 20,397 credit enrollments. And this is what that looked like in terms of course retention and success. 68.2%, or nearly 14,000 course enrollments, were considered a successful course completion. That means they resulted in a grade of an A, B, C, or pass. Just under 2,000 enrollments resulted in a grade of a D, F, or not pass. So that means those were retained but not successfully completed. And finally, there were 4,560 grades that were a W, which is a withdrawal, or an EW, the excused withdrawal. Let's dig into that a little bit. In the yellow section, 3,465 of those grades were the EW, or excused withdrawal grade, and just under 1,100 were W grades. I put the date there to note that I drew down this data file towards the end of July. And that's important to note because this picture is changing on a daily basis. Students still have the opportunity to retroactively change their grades for spring 2020. So it's important to know that you are looking at a particular point in time. So don't get too fixated on these actual numbers because they will change over the coming months. And now we'll compare that to spring 2019. And so right now you are just seeing the same pie chart that you just saw on the previous slide. And in spring 2019, you'll notice that it was very similar in terms of the number of enrollments. The pie chart looks slightly different for spring 2019 than it does for spring 2020. In spring 2019, there were nearly 15,000 enrollments that resulted in a grade of A, B, C, or pass. That's a slightly higher number and percentage than in spring 2020. There were more Ds, Fs, and non-pass grades in spring 2019 than there were in spring 2020. But there were fewer grades that were in the withdrawal section. And bear in mind, there were no EW grades in spring 2019. You might be wondering, or you may have noticed that I'm pulling from two different data sources. And the reason I am not pulling data from the data mart for spring 2020 is that EW grades are actually not included and will not be included in the data mart. From the Chancellor's Office perspective, an EW grade is as if an enrollment never happened. And so those numbers, once they become finalized, will not be reflected in the data mart. Okay, so we just talked about enrollments for spring 2020. And now we'll talk about the students. So there were a total of 7,795 students in spring 2020. Of those, nearly 5,700 did not receive an EW grade. That's 73% of the students. Of that group, 5,090 students passed all of their courses. So they passed with a grade of A, B, C, or pass. And 603 students received one or more D's, F's, or W's. And I'm circling this in red because we'll actually come back and talk about this group on a later slide. So just over 2,100 students received one or more EW grades. And one of the questions that's been emerging is, what do our EW students look like? And it's actually a pretty challenging question to answer because our students have very different education goals, and they have very different sets of course enrollments. Some students are here for CTE, for example. Some students might be taking just one course only, whereas other students might have a full load. So we're going to dig a little bit deeper into this group of 2,100 students. There were 1,254 students that had one EW grade as of the end of July. In that group of students might have been taking one course only. There were actually 505 of these students who only had one course. And so that means they dropped their only course. By contrast, there were some students that were taking 5 courses that had one EW grade. There were 500, oh, before I jump to that, let me just point out that the EW grades actually cut across the board in terms of like what courses students were taking. There were 520 students that had 2 EW grades. And again, these students could have been taking 2 courses, they could have been taking 3 or 4 or more courses. I'm circling this group because we'll come back to them a little bit later. And finally, there were 328 students that had 3 or more EW grades. And in this group of students, these tended to be students who were full-time students, and their course-taking patterns of the 328 students suggest that they were degree or transfer-seeking students. And these students were more likely to be more recent high school graduates. There were a total of 848 students that had EW grades in all their courses. And those 848 students cut across these 3 different groups. And we are currently continuing to do work to dig a little bit deeper to look at EW grades in specific courses. And we'll talk about that later as well. So looking ahead to fall 2020, there have been a number of strategies and interventions that we've employed And a number of these have actually been employed since we went into shelter in place in March. And I want to thank both Dr. Cannoli as well as Mr. Walker for providing all of the information on these next few slides. And if either of them would like to jump in and add to the information that I'm presenting, please feel free to do so. So first, there is support provided for on-campus instruction. We are continuing with some limited in-person instruction for a number of courses in essential areas, such as health professions, as well as some public safety areas. We are providing additional support for instructional faculty in online courses. For the first two bullets, Dr. Cannoli mentioned both of these areas in his written report, and he also commented on it earlier in this board meeting. The third bullet, leading from the middle, MPC actually has two teams that are participating in a statewide Leading from the Middle Academy this 2020 year. They are teams that include both instructional faculty as well as student services and classified members, so they're cross-functional teams. We actually began our work at the beginning of 2020 before shelter in place, and we were originally focused on a project related to providing support at the Marine Education Center. And as soon as shelter in place happened, we actually shifted focus of our work, and we're now focused on providing support for online instruction. There are also supports provided for students. There's the CARES funding, expanded student support, and online library and tutorial services. There's library curbside checkout. And there's a pending internet agreement to provide internet access to students. Additional supports for students include an online student communication plan, individualized follow-up with students. And you'll recall on a previous slide, I talked about the fact that there are 600 or so students that received at least one D, F, or W grade. And student services is actually following up with those students to make sure that they are aware of their options and that they're aware that an EW grade is one of the options that they have. There's outreach and support services for students. And these are actually links to some of the support and messages that students have received.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan. It's a really interesting edit report. You're kind of slowly, so I don't know if you're having connectivity issues and still wanting to say something.
Oh no, I'm here.
Okay.
I was leaving it open for questions, or if Dr. Cannoli or Mr. Walker wanted to jump in on those last few slides.
Okay. If I may jump in, Dr. Ryan, just to highlight a previous slide and to really sing the praises of this entire campus community. And that slide would be the pie charts that compared last spring to this spring. And, you know, it doesn't need to be stated what our community and what this country and the world went through over the spring semester. And to look at the numbers and see that we only had a 5% impact from a normal spring semester. All things considered, that is just phenomenal work by this entire campus. And I want to take a moment to recognize that and not lose sight of the fact that throughout all of the chaos and the transition in a moment of craziness, we were able to complete, you know, almost 95% of students who would have completed in a normal semester. So I just wanted to take a minute to acknowledge Dr. Cannoli, Larry Walker, Rebecca, all the faculty, staff, and this entire campus, because the impact could have been a lot worse than just 5%. So I just wanted to highlight and reiterate that fact, because I think as a campus and as an institution of higher education, we should be darn proud of that.
Completely agree. Thank you.
I just wanted to add, work began immediately after shelter in place. Dr. Cannoli and Dr. Cabrera, who was serving as the acting dean of online education, reached out to me immediately and said, can we get a student survey out? And then Mr. Walker reached out after that to get one out related to support services. So we were able to get surveys out to the students within just 2 to 3 days of being sheltered in place to understand what those needs were. And Student Services was able to follow up with students immediately who said that they wanted someone to contact them because they needed extra support.
All right. Questions on the report from the board? Trustee Steck.
Sure, I'll start with a comment, and I like these 2 pie charts here for another reason, and that is, yes, I see the 5% decrement from last spring to this spring, but what you don't see is the fact that last spring most of the courses were in person, whereas this spring all of those courses were online. Last year we had, or over the past several years, we had a 65% pass rate of the online courses that we had, the distance education courses that we had. So in fact, you can see a 5% decrement, or you can see a 3% improvement over what we had in previous years, because those courses are all online. So I think that's actually quite exciting and vastly different from, say, what LACCD has been talking about. You remember a month or 2 ago, I said that LACCD had analyzed its data, and they were seeing a 17% decrement in pass completions, in completions of courses. And that's a huge drop. And the fact that we only have a 5% drop in passage, I think is wonderful. And if you think of it the other way, the increase in online performance. It is disappointing to hear that the Chancellor's Office will be obfuscating this data from now on, because they're not going to look at the excused withdrawals. That's an important component of how people do, and the fact that the Chancellor's Office has decided they're not going to show those data to us means that all those numbers will be wrong, and it will obscure whatever decrements there are system-wide and district-wide. And that's truly unfortunate. That's not our problem, that's their problem. I do have so that's my pontification, sorry about that, everybody. But I do have a question for Rosaline, and that is if you go to an earlier, I believe it's an earlier slide, we broke out ethnicities, different student groups for the past 3 years, and we haven't broken them out for this year. So it's like we're ready to see those kinds of things, but I know they're not available. But I'm wondering if you could explain to us why they're not available, and will we be expecting them at some point in time?
Sure. So we collect very detailed ethnicity data on our students. So for instance, one of the broader categories is Asian. Within that, students can indicate which country they're from. When we and all of the community colleges send our data to the Chancellor's Office, we're required to code our data into about 8 or so broader categories. So all of the Asian categories, for example, would be coded as Asian. So some of that detail is lost when we send our information to the Chancellor's Office. The Chancellor's Office requires all of us to report our data in the same way, so that when they make it publicly available, it makes it easier for the public to compare between colleges. We have not yet, the data that I'm looking at for spring 2020 has the detailed level data. It does not have the coding that is used when we report our data to the Chancellor's office. So I was not able to provide ethnicity data using the same codes that I presented the historical data in. I could have presented the raw coding. It would have been a lot of different categories, and it would have been potentially confusing to try and compare that to the spring 2019 data. It wouldn't have been an apples to apples comparison. It would have showed vastly different ethnicity categories.
Will we get those kinds of data in the future at some point? Will we be able to go to Data Mart and see, for example?
Yeah, it takes a little while to do that coding.
Other questions? No. So I think this is probably along the lines of what Dr. Steck was asking, but when you were presenting about you know, students enrolled in distance education, and just interested in knowing, you know, what are the different sorts of supports that those students needed based on different demographic criteria to be successful. And if that is something that we'll be able to see in the future, to disaggregate the data that way and then connect it to what were the interventions that actually helped them persist, so that we can think about how we scale those interventions.
If you don't mind, Rosaline, I'll just try to speak a little bit to that. And one of the things that, through my experience, when I'm finding, is there's no magic wand. There are three elements that are so important, that were important 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and today. That we stay consistent with communicating with students. And that's what we've done a little bit more than in the past. As you know, one of the interventions, we came up with a communication plan. On a weekly basis, a communication is going out to students, reminding them of the most important things at that time. In addition, it's telling them and reminding them about resources. One of the things that we continue to try to support students is to be able to access resources. It's without fail that we hear that students don't know about this, they don't know about that. They're inundated with so much information. There's so many things going on that it's real time. It's real time. What's most important for me at that time? That's when that resource list becomes readily available and makes sense to them. So with that being said, communication's the key. And we've been doing more and more of that on a weekly basis. Secondarily, access to services and instructors. And I think the irony of this COVID experience is we're seeing more engagement with our students in this online format than we had face-to-face, meaning that we're able to communicate more readily and with more flexibility than ever before. We have, in the interventions, we were offering during the first week services from 7 virtual welcome center with real-time support from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. to include Saturday and Sunday. That is something that you would think in a face-to-face format would be unheard of. So this has actually expanded services to engage students in real time. So access to services is another one. And then the third piece, which is we've doubled down on, is follow-up. Follow-up, follow-up, follow-up. Rosaline, Dr. Ryan mentioned that reports were given about EW grades and about student surveys. we were able to garner reports through IT and through the Office of Pre to identify students and reach out to them immediately, prioritizing those students that were still enrolled for fall, that in spring grades, students that were enrolled in the summer, students that were enrolled in summer and fall, and then students that were not even enrolled. And what we end up happening is we join forces at an institutional level with student services and academic affairs to go outside of student services. We had LTC staff, library technology staff, that normally that did not have to work at that time. They took on a load of following up students. We prioritized the follow-up. So we were eliciting more support beyond your normal student services area. So when we talk about cause and effect, it's really hard to say that this intervention equated to that, but the common themes: communication, more of it; access, reminding students that this is available to them, so when it's right for them, they can get it. And then third, an active follow-up mechanism that we're relentless in our support to reach out to students consistently. And that goes beyond the normal traditional face-to-face 9 to 5. It goes beyond that. We have our counselors taking calls at 8 o'clock at night, on the weekend. So those are just some things I wanted to add to the interventions.
Thanks, Larry. This might be somewhat similar, or you sort of touched on a little bit. One of the things that I was wondering about, if you're looking into, of the 848 students who had EWs and courses, how many of those have we been able to bring back? Or have we really dug into those students to try to figure out how do we get them re-engaged on their course, if that's possible?
At this juncture, I know we don't have that information. We do have information, obviously, on who we're reaching out to. So the next phase would probably be able to run a report to see how many of those are re-engaged. We do know that some of the individuals, we do have reports of some of the individuals that had EW grades in the spring of 2020. We do know how many enrolled in the summer, how many enrolled in the fall, and how many did not enroll in the spring. And we prioritize the follow-up based on those. The next step, Chair Anderson, what you're looking at is, in your statement, is how many of those did actually follow through with enrollment. I think we could work with Pre and IT to get that information.
Yeah, and I've actually, I've been working with IT to get the data for both summer and fall so that we can track those students over time.
Awesome, thank you. Just want to let you know, I turned my video off because I'm getting a message that my internet is unstable. I'm still here very much listening, but trying to preserve bandwidth.
Yeah, and just to let you know, some of the feedback we're getting from students, it is across the board, COVID related, but it could have been family indirectly impacted. It's just a broad spectrum. And even though there's some that are willing, they just, it's the online format that they may not be interested in. It's just we're trying to garner themes that will allow us to sort of compile pockets of terms that students and reasons that they did not return or they did return. So we're trying to code those things as well.
Great, thank you. Other questions from trustees? All right, seeing none, look to the public. Is there any member of the public that would like to make a comment on this report? Again, you go to your participants tab at the bottom, you're going to see raise hand, or if you scroll over more, you might see it. If you're on the phone, it's *9. I'm like a telephone operator. All right, seeing none, bring it back for any final comments from the trustees. Trustee Staff.
Well, I don't mean for this to be a final comment that sounds final. One of the the things in one of Rosalie's last slides was the use of CARE Act funds for our students. And I know that we're able to provide Chromebooks, for example, through CARE Act funding for students. This is a broaching for a different piece of the conversation, but I wonder about the CARES Act. I know that we have need for more teacher training for online courses, and we could use some of our CARES Act money for that. I hope that we have used up all the money, or used up, that we have given Chromebooks to every student who needs one. I'm wondering if there's other money available. And the reason why I'm asking that is I got a communication from Keith Curry today, and Keith is the president superintendent of Compton Community College and a UC Santa Cruz PhD. You know, I have to shout out to anybody from UC Santa Cruz. And he was quite excited about the fact that he figured out a way to use some of his CARES funding to subsidize housing for homeless students, of which there are probably many more in Compton than there are where we are. But I'm wondering if there's any money available to do something like that, and would that have an impact on potentially have an impact on our students' behaviors in passing classes as opposed to withdrawing from them?
Good question.
And I can go ahead and jump in and answer that question. And Larry, if you are able to add any context, it'd be much appreciated. But yes, Dr. Stack, MPC did receive different allocations and funding sources under the CARES umbrella. We have budgeted a good portion of that, but there is a remaining amount that is currently unearmarked for future needs in regards to the transition online. We will spend the beginning part and continue to spend the fall semester evaluating how best to utilize or operationalize those funds. But we do have until June 30th of 2021 to spend a majority of those funds. So we do have some time to make sure that however we deploy those resources, we do so in a way that best serves the needs of our students here at MPC.
And just to add, to drill down a little bit more to what David is referencing, during the spring, and I know Becky and the foundation and Student Financial Services, during spring 2020, in the span of 3 months, we served over 500 students and distributed over $400,000 in 3 months. Much of that was emergency aid to students, obviously. We continued that and allocated more monies, and this is pre-COVID dollars. These were our categorical dollars and money raised by the foundation. 500 students, $400,000 in 3 months is pretty significant. And we continued that throughout the summer, and that's also available over this fall semester. We've allocated quite a bit of money within the context of the CARES funding, over $1.4 million, that will go to direct aid to students. Amongst our student services team, in consultation with others outside of student services, you mentioned about housing. We thought allocating money to students based on what they need and allow them to make the decision that they feel is most best and need at that time, whether it's food, whether it's shelter, whether it's lights, whether it's electricity, whatever it may be. Give the money to the students as quickly and efficiently as possible and let them make the decision based on what real need is in front of them at the time. Because we know it varies and it changes. But I can assure you, of the 500 students and $400,000 that was distributed over the spring, some of that did go to subsidize housing.
Thank you very much, all of you. That makes all of us feel wonderful, including me.
All right, any additional comments from the trustees on this report related to student success? Oh, it looks like Becky wanted to say something.
Thank you, Yuri. I just wanted to add to what Larry just mentioned. Actually, it was close to 1,000 students that were helped through that emergency assistance program. So that was the number that I calculated. So it was a significant number of students. So kudos to financial aid and to the foundation team for working together on that.
Thank you. All right, so with that, we will deem the report received, and thank you very much, Dr. Ryan, for that really informative and I think important report. I really enjoy when we get to spend time digging into the numbers and asking our random questions and the rabbit holes that send you down. So, all right, so now we're on to item number 9. Try turning my video back on. Hopefully I don't get disconnected. On the agenda, trustee and committee comments and reports. So first we have item 9A, which is board ad hoc committee reports. We've had a number of our board ad hocs meet over the past month, including our superintendent president search committee. The process continues. The recruitment period is on the 31st at noon. We aren't able to say how many applicants we have received at this time per advice from our consultant, but we will let you know that there has been interest in our position. So the committee is presently working on making sure that we have a solid rubric for evaluating candidate applications, as well. We have an ad hoc formed with representatives from each of our subgroups that the board outlined to be on the search committee, being a first draft of interview questions.
Is Yuri frozen or am I?
And if I may, trustees.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
I think we may have dropped or lost Yuri as a connection issue. But ultimately, in giving her a couple moments to log back in, which I'm sure she's doing, we will potentially transition now to the governing board comments, and then we can circle back to the ad hoc reports upon Chair Anderson's return. So I would welcome any of the trustees to provide their comments at this point.
I can start. I have very little to report from Community Human Services. Things are going well. The big news is the Community Human Services is trying to populate the staff for Casa de Noche Buena, which is the women's shelter that they receive funding for, along with Gathering for Women. So that was very exciting. You know, there's lots of interesting problems, and the state's problems trickle down to us, and they also trickle down to organizations like Community Human Services. But they're working hard and doing the best they can under the circumstances.
And I would, if Lauren is finished, I would just like to jump in and say congratulations to Rosalind, because I read in David's mailbag that she has been elected now officially for her first term, her first 2-year term. You get to do this again in 2 years, Rosalind, I think. But anyway, congratulations. I'm delighted for you.
That's what I get for turning my video on.
You're back.
I'm back. Sorry. I'm hoping Marilyn finished the report.
Actually, she didn't. We were waiting for you because you left mid-sentence.
You guys are so lovely. I don't know what sentence it was because I just completed it, and then I was like, everyone else isn't moving. And then I heard Rosalind say, is Yuri frozen? We're doing the work. We're trying to meet the timeline that's been outlined. So if there's other particular questions, Trustee Dungufs and I are happy to try to answer, though we might just say that's confidential. All right. Also had, obviously, we heard from the Board Evaluation and Goals Committee. Thank you for that work. And then the Board Policy Subcommittee, we approved some minutes earlier in consent, but if there's anything that Trustee Steck or Trustee Dunn Gustafson wanted to add to that conversation? No? Okay. So
Not yet.
Not yet. Well,
Not yet.
thank you. Not yet. Thank you to everyone for diving in, and I guess also thank you to Trustee Green and Trustee Johnson for, they had been on an ad hoc related to prior with the question around the bond, and so that has closed out. So we've all been working quite a lot this year. So with that, if there are no questions from the board or questions or comments from the public, scanning, seeing none, we will move on to governing board comments. So it's not on there, but we'll usually start with Trustee Steck. Any report from CHS or CCLC in addition to just anything you want to share with the board?
Well, you missed my incredibly scintillating report about CHS already. It fit entirely into the time when you were not connected. So that's how. I do have one more very short report, and that is about the task force on the funding formula, which of course has broadened its purview to the task force on the budget and what in the world's happening with the budget and how it's going to impact the colleges. And so this is why I know a little bit, why I came armed, able to talk to Steve in a way that not everybody is, because I'm also involved in that. And I can't say that we're doing, I think that the task force is reeling the same that everybody else is reeling about what the deferrals mean, what the cuts really are, trying to work through how does this whole thing work. It's challenging, and so they are working on the challenge, and I'm a nearby bystander watching them work on the challenge. It's very interesting and challenging. That's it.
Thank you. And then I heard you congratulating Trustee Green, so we'll move on to Rosalind. I was going to call you Rosaline. Rosalind, any comments from Rosalind?
Thank you, Marilyn and team, for the congrats. I appreciate it. And like Dr. Steck mentioned, those budget meetings and webinars are very informative and they're intense. So my hat's off to you, Lauren, because you're there weekly, right?
You know, one of the, oh, go ahead. I was going to follow up on that, but go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
It's okay. I'll just say one more thing and then I'll throw it back to you. Monterey County School Board Association is having a Zoom session on implicit biases, September 14th. And the special guest facilitator is Nicole Anderson. I had the pleasure of hearing her present for Monterey Peninsula Unified School District, and she's awesome. So I don't know if you all have signed up for this. If not, I highly recommend it. And back to you, Lauren.
I just wanted to say that Rosalind and I both independently attended the budget workshop that Steve was commenting on very briefly in his talk, and David was also in that workshop. I doubt if there were 20 trustees across the state though who listened to that workshop, and it just made me feel wonderful to see that Rosalind was also there. One of the things that they do to try to goose it up a little bit is they have these little survey items that they throw at you every once in a while. And one of the first survey items was what's happening at your college for fall enrollments. And something on the order of 2/3 of all the districts that responded said that enrollments were dropping relative to last year for the fall. And I haven't heard that from us. In fact, I've kind of heard a little bit the opposite, and I think this is rare and a really good sign for MPC.
Okay, so
my internet has decided it's time for the meeting to end, so I'm using my phone data. But so, Marilyn, comments?
My comment was to congratulate Rosalind on her reelection. It shows that we made a really good choice representing the people of your district, whatever it is, 1 or 2, I get them confused, but primarily Seaside. So it shows that we.
Awesome, that'd be 1. Trustee Johnson, did you already make your comments?
Oh, no, I wouldn't do that till you could hear them. First of all, I want to also congratulate Rosalind, but I have to tell you, I had gone to the website for Monterey County elections and your name wasn't there. And I went, oh no, she didn't turn in her papers yet and she missed it. So I was so happy, and I want to congratulate Monterey Peninsula College for being able to have Rosalind continue. It's our college that wins with that. So congratulations. No, beyond that, I just want to say how thankful I am that everyone is here in spite of the fires that have been going, and my heart goes out to all the MPC people that have been impacted by it. And to our students, I just want to say, I'm so proud of you, what you are doing and how you're doing it. And please stick with it, because we need people who have been well educated in all areas, but certainly in science, if we ever face something like COVID-19 again, because God knows we need people to do better than we've been doing so far. Thank you. That's the end of my sort of political comment.
All right, thank you. Well, I'll say woot woot, Rosalind. And let's see, so I had notes on here that we have a bunch of birthdays in September that I thought we would be celebrating before we meet again, but there are at least 2 before I think. So I wanted to just thank Dr. Van Julen and Mr. Hagler for being with us and wish you a happy birthday early in September. The later September birthdays we will celebrate later in September. As you all know, I work for Supervisor Adams, or I think most of you know. So I've spent a lot of time this past more than a week now. I guess it's been a week since last Wednesday, going out every day to incident command for the River and Carmel fires, and getting those daily briefings and being able to forward the questions and concerns of district residents to try to make sure people are well informed and about what's been happening. And I just want to say that having the opportunity to talk with Chief Fulcher and Chief Uricades on a regular basis, and Reno DiTullio, who's the chief over in San Benito, and just seeing how important our public safety and fire training program is to our community, to our entire state, and hearing from them how MPC's fire training program is one of almost any fire training program that is still going on despite COVID-19, and how impactful it is to our system. Just really want to thank our faculty and staff and admin and for figuring out how to keep that going, because it is critical that we continue to provide that training. As you know, Rick is saying, we need people in the STEM, we need people to be working on climate change, because this is our new normal. These increasingly tragic and long wildfire seasons are just something that my generation and my children's generation are going to have to live with and really figure out. And to the extent that MPC can be providing people to help deal with it, I'm very, very proud to see all of those young men and women coming back to fight and protect our community. So with that, the only thing left on our agenda is the advanced planning, and you'll see it there. We have a number of topics this board has indicated interest in discussing. I'm not going to run through it. I would like to point out that we did have September 10th outlined as a board retreat or study date, and And the conversation we've been having, knowing that we're going to have a new board online, and I think that the resources that we would have put into having some sort of facilitation for that would be better spent in the new year. Not to say that Marilyn and Rick, you aren't valued, but I think that we could maybe pause on retreat, but I'm thinking that that might be the date, since we already all have it on our calendar, that we go ahead and plan to have our follow-up discussion on the midterm report. So if that works for people, we can just get our team to renotice it as a special board meeting versus a retreat. And if seeing thumbs up, thumbs
Good
up.
suggestion.
What time?
All right.
Suggestion.
All right, so other than that, so we'll see each other on the 10th and then again on the 23rd. And if there's nothing else for the good of the order, scanning through, I'm on my phone now, because that's how we roll in 2020. We will go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 7:46 p.m. and wish you all a good night and good luck.
Yes. Good
Take care.
night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.